Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 1 of our story. If you like this what if story and want to see part 2, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. This story was posted by LazyAnimaniac on Wattpad. Now let's start. His entire life, Izuku had been told that he was powerless. Midoriya Izuku, a resident of the Mizutofu district in Japan, belonged to the 20% of the population that was quirkless, meaning he lacked a superpower. Throughout his childhood, he faced bullying, ridicule, and constant belittlement. At the age of 4, when Izuku returned from the quirk doctor to share the news with his best friend Bakugo Katsuki, known as Kaken, Bakugo erupted in anger, not out of sympathy, but out of disappointment in himself for ever being kind to someone he deemed useless. Throughout elementary school, Izuku was the target of laughter and scorn. As he entered middle school, Bakugo and his friends became increasingly aggressive. Bakugo used his explosion quirk without hesitation, instilling fear in everyone around him. The teachers, too, remained indifferent, believing there was no point in defending someone they considered powerless. Despite this, Izuku always dreamed of becoming a hero. He watched videos of heroes defeating villains, took notes, and immersed himself in his passion. No matter how many times others told him it was impossible, he refused to give up. Everything changed when he encountered his idol, the #1 hero, All Might. As Izuku walked home, reviewing his journals, he was startled by the sudden appearance of a slime villain. Overwhelmed with fear, his instinct was to flee. However, the villain captured him, attempting to absorb him into its green sludge. Struggling to stay conscious, Izuku felt his strength fading and his vision darkening. In that moment of despair, he wished he had a quirk. Then, a powerful force struck the villain, sending it flying away. All Might appeared, declaring his presence with enthusiasm. Izuku, overwhelmed with excitement, could hardly contain himself as he asked for the hero's signature in his notebook. All Might obliged, but when Izuku asked if he could still become a hero despite being quirkless, All Might's response was disheartening. He explained that without a quirk, Izuku would only be a liability and suggested he consider a different path, like becoming a police officer. Izuku's heart sank. He understood All Might's words were grounded in reality, and tears began to flow as he dropped to his knees. He vowed to himself that he would train away his sadness and prove everyone wrong. He would show Katsuki and All Might that he was more than just a quirkless dreamer. Looking up at the sky, he declared his intention to make an impact on the world, transforming his body and spirit to embody everything he had endured, the bullying, the rejection, and the pain. Determined, Izuku decided to leave school and pursue advanced college courses online. With an impressive IQ of 134, he committed to improving himself further. He began a rigorous training regimen, starting with 30 repetitions of various exercises and gradually increasing to within months. His hard work began to pay off, and he developed a muscular physique. As he isolated himself in his basement, he not only focused on physical training but also on meditation and emotional resilience. He practiced various martial arts and weapon techniques, honing his skills in swordsmanship, marksmanship, and self-defense. He adhered to a strict diet and pushed his body beyond its limits. As time passed, Izuku noticed peculiar changes. His hair grew long, and he developed heightened senses, becoming more aware of his surroundings. After conducting research, he discovered that he had indeed developed a quirk. Named Primal Instinct, it allowed him to tap into animal senses and transform into any member of the big cat family, from a housecat to a lion, and even choose the age of his transformation. To test his newfound ability, Izuku stood still, concentrating on becoming a panther. He concentrated and tapped into his primal instinct. Suddenly, his body began to transform. Black fur emerged along his form, and his limbs elongated and became leaner. Black ears appeared atop his head, and a long, thin tail sprouted behind him. His mouth took on a more animalistic shape, and his teeth sharpened. Izuku felt a tingling sensation of excitement and anticipation coursing through him, heightening his awareness of the world around him. The experience was exhilarating, filling him with a sense of power and confidence. When he opened his eyes, they revealed stunning, glowing emerald green irises with slitted black pupils that seemed to draw one in. Tentatively, he moved a paw forward and leaped ahead. He surged forward with astonishing speed and strength, leaving him in awe of his newfound abilities. It felt as if he were soaring, until he collided with the wall. In an instant, he reverted to his human form, somehow retaining his clothes. He rubbed his nose, feeling the sting and thinking that he would need to improve his control. Izuku dedicated himself to training, exploring the depths of his quirk. He learned that maintaining his animal form required significant mental discipline, but it was a challenge he was eager to tackle. During one practice session, he accidentally manifested a set of lion-like teeth while enjoying some fresh meat, discovering that he could partially transform. However, he also realized there were limitations. The duration of his transformation depended on his mental strength. The stronger his mental capacity, the longer he could remain in his animal form. Additionally, his hair needed to reach a certain length to access his quirk, but frequent use allowed him to manage with slightly shorter hair. He theorized that the connection to animals required a certain amount of fur, and to transform into larger cats, he needed a link to them. His mental capacity had initially held him back, but through meditation in his basement, he increased his mental energy. With his hair serving as an anchor to connect him to his primal instinct, Izuku finally accessed his quirk. He integrated this training with his regular regimen and soon became proficient in its use. Through sheer determination, Izuku broke through the limits of his quirk, a rare achievement in his society that demanded extraordinary stamina and resilience. Few had been documented to accomplish such a feat, and all were already powerful individuals who had trained for years. Only a select few possessed the potential to surpass their quirk's boundaries, often unaware of their capabilities. Even those with innate abilities struggled to access them, despite rigorous training. Yet, within months, Izuku unlocked this legendary power and mastered it completely. However, this came at a cost. While he gained immense strength and his quirk evolved to become even more potent without limitations, he found himself feeling emotionally dulled. Though he still maintained the charm of a hybrid between an endearing cinnamon roll and an attractive figure, his emotions became rare and muted. If he were to be described as a blend of those traits, he had also taken on aspects reminiscent of a younger Izawa, hinting at a future connection between them. When Izuku finally emerged from his basement of doom, as his mother affectionately called it, she was astonished by the transformation. Her son had grown from a small, flustered boy into a tall, muscular, and striking young man. His hair had grown out, now slightly longer than before, and his eyes appeared lighter, almost glowing with a vibrant energy. Izuku's hair was fluffy and green, with light green highlights that seemed to shimmer. His mother noticed that his clothes no longer fit him, as he had become much taller and more broad-shouldered. The tight-fitting shirt revealed his toned physique, showcasing his impressive muscles. Despite the dramatic change in his appearance, she recognized that he was still her son. Inko rushed towards him, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks as she enveloped him in a warm embrace. Izuku returned the hug, his own eyes glistening with emotion. This was the first time she had truly seen the young man he had become. After they shared their heartfelt moment, Izuku explained everything to Inko, recounting his experiences with bullying and rejection, leading up to his encounter with All Might, and detailing his rigorous training and quirk. As he finished, Inko's eyes filled with fresh tears, cascading down her cheeks. She expressed her sorrow for the hardships he had endured, her heart breaking for the pain he had suffered. Izuku, feeling overwhelmed by her concern, thanked her for her unwavering support. The two of them shared a moment of vulnerability, tears flowing freely as they embraced each other tightly, overwhelmed by their emotions. In the midst of their heartfelt exchange, the narrative shifted to a humorous note, as the author playfully lamented the chaos caused by their tears, which threatened to break the fourth wall. Despite the light-hearted interruption, the emotional connection between Izuku and Inko remained strong. Izuku continued to train diligently, even though he was already in excellent shape. He pushed himself further, completing an impressive number of push-ups while lifting a heavy dumbbell with one hand. After finishing, he decided to go for a quick jog to clear his mind. As he jogged through his neighborhood, thoughts of the upcoming UA entrance exam filled his mind. He anticipated challenges ahead, knowing that UA was known for its rigorous testing. While jogging, a few cats emerged from the alleys, drawn to him as if they sensed a kindred spirit. One black cat with striking green eyes leaped from a rooftop and landed on Izuku's head, settling comfortably in his fluffy hair. Izuku, who had always had a soft spot for cats, reached up to scratch the cat's ear, smiling at the unexpected companion. He gently asked the cat if it wanted to come home with him, feeling a sense of companionship. The cat responded by nuzzling against his hand, purring contentedly. With the black cat perched atop his head and others following closely behind, Izuku continued his jog, feeling a sense of joy and connection with his newfound friends. As Izuku continued to jog, the cats trotting behind him, he unwittingly entered a rough neighborhood while it was still dark. Suddenly, a man emerged from the shadows, brandishing a gun and demanding Izuku's wallet. The man shouted for him to stay still, threatening that he would experience the consequences of defiance. Izuku, however, wore a grin that puzzled the villain. He confidently suggested that this could be considered self-defense. The villain, taken aback, warned Izuku not to make any sudden moves, but before he could react, Izuku surged forward with astonishing speed. In one fluid motion, he kicked the gun from the villain's grasp and delivered a powerful spin kick to his torso. The force of Izuku's kick sent the villain crashing into a wall, leaving a noticeable crack behind. In a matter of seconds, Izuku caught the gun mid-air and aimed it at the now disoriented villain. With a wide smirk reminiscent of Aizawa's signature grin, Izuku taunted the villain about his earlier bravado. The villain's shock morphed into fear and then anger, leading him to lunge at Izuku with a hidden knife. Izuku deftly dodged the villain's wild swings, cautioning him that he could accidentally hurt someone. Frustrated, the villain charged again, only to be met with a rapid series of martial arts strikes. The villain struggled to keep up, choking under the pressure of Izuku's relentless assault. After delivering a final blow, the villain crashed to the ground, creating a small crater upon impact. Izuku sighed, acknowledging that he might have overdone it, but justified it by noting the villain's weakness. He pulled out his phone to call for help, reporting the unconscious villain on the street and providing his location. As he jogged away, the cats remained calm, confident in Izuku's abilities. From Aizawa's perspective, he couldn't help but be astonished after Izuku left. He knew All Might would disapprove of his choice of words, but the situation warranted such a reaction. Quickly, he called 911 to inform them he was there to take the villain into custody. Aizawa leaped down from his vantage point and examined the defeated villain, who lay unconscious and battered. What surprised Aizawa most was that despite erasing Izuku's quirk to prevent any illegal use, the boy had not relied on it at all. Aizawa found himself intrigued by Izuku's incredible strength, charming grin, and the affection the cats showed him. As a cat lover himself, Aizawa recognized that the boy must possess a remarkable character to earn their trust. With a slight grin, he wrapped the unconscious villain in his capture cloth and leaped onto the rooftops, heading toward the nearest police station. He planned to seek out Izuku later, eager to learn more about the boy who displayed such potential. Izuku, meanwhile, was at home, petting his new black cat and contemplating a name for him. After taking the cat for a checkup, he discovered that it was a healthy male with no owner. Noticing a small scar on its muzzle, Izuku decided to think of it as a battle scar, dubbing the cat his little warrior. Inspired, he leaped from the couch, causing the cat to protest at the sudden loss of warmth. Recalling something he had read in an ancient language, which he had studied, Izuku learned that 𝗬𝗁 meant strong or mighty, akin to a warrior. He began pacing, deep in thought, and soon declared that the cat's name would be 𝗬𝗁, loosely translating to little warrior. The cat seemed pleased with its new name, its emerald eyes shining with approval. With the UA entrance exams approaching, Izuku resolved to brush up on his skills. He decided to spend 3 days cleaning up Dekuwhatif Municipal Beach, believing it would be a manageable task. As he prepared to leave, 𝗬𝗁 unexpectedly jumped onto his back, gripping tightly with his claws. Though it surprised Izuku, he didn't mind the minor discomfort. He attempted to turn around to see 𝗵𝗵𝗃, but the cat clung on securely. When Izuku reached back to remove him, 𝗵𝗵𝗃 swatted his hand away in protest. With a resigned sigh, Izuku accepted the situation and stepped out the door, the cat firmly attached to his back. Passers-by witnessing this unusual sight might have sworn that the cat wore a triumphant expression. 15 minutes later, Izuku took a deep breath, relishing the fresh air, the sandy beach, and the sound of rolling waves. However, his excitement was quickly overshadowed by the sight of a massive pile of trash. It was a clear indication that they had arrived. He glanced at 𝗵𝗵𝗃, who meowed in agreement. During the ride, 𝗵𝗵𝗃 had settled into his favorite position, perched comfortably on top of Izuku's fluffy dark green hair. With determination, Izuku approached the trash pile, ready to start lifting it without using his quirk. He had already done plenty of quirk training at home, and this location was perfect for a good physical workout. From his hidden spot, Izawa grumbled about the unusual sight of someone picking up trash at such an early hour. He decided to take advantage of the moment and drifted off to sleep in his yellow caterpillar sleeping bag, which was amusingly buried within the trash. Suddenly, Izuku's exclamation jolted Izawa awake. As he shifted to face the boy, he mumbled for quiet, noting that it was still early in the morning. Izuku, with a monotone voice that mirrored Izawa's own, apologized and promised to clean up elsewhere. As the boy walked away, Izawa took a moment to observe him. The realization struck Izawa as he recognized the boy and the cat on his head. A slight grin formed on Izawa's face as he attempted to extricate himself from the trash pile, only to flop over and tumble onto the ground. He muttered to himself about still being in his sleeping bag. The boy with the dark green hair turned around, seemingly unfazed. Izawa noted the emerald highlights in the boy's hair and the intelligent green glow of his eyes. The boy appeared tall and well-built, with a noticeable outline of an impressive physique beneath his shirt. Izawa thought to himself that this would indeed be interesting. As Izawa emerged from his sleeping bag, Izuku couldn't help but admire it. It was a striking banana yellow, a product of top makers. He had a similar one, but his was an eye-catching highlighter green, a color that was actually its official name. Izuku recognized Izawa as the man who had observed him the previous day. Mild surprise flickered across Izawa's face before he masked it. He confirmed his identity and asked if Izuku knew who he was. Izuku responded with confidence, detailing Izawa's hero name, Eraserhead, and explaining his quirk, which allowed him to erase others' quirks just by looking at them. He elaborated on the drawbacks of the quirk and Izawa's appearance, noting the large bags under his eyes. Izuku continued to express admiration for Izawa's sleeping bag, mentioning its excellent condition and speculating about its bulletproof lining. He rambled on about improving his own eyesight and sensory aspects of his quirk, lost in thought. Izawa observed the teenager with a blank expression, intrigued by his enthusiasm. Finally, Izawa interrupted, suggesting that Izuku had potential, albeit limited, and proposed a test. Izuku looked up, meeting Izawa's gaze, and agreed, expressing his eagerness for a good challenge. Izawa observed the young boy with a subtle grin, recognizing his remarkable intellect and impressive reflexes, all displayed without the use of his quirk. He decided to take the boy to UA for an evaluation by Nizu, confident that they would connect well. However, he felt a slight shiver at the thought of Nizu interacting with the boy, wondering if it might lead to some unexpected fun. He instructed the boy to follow him, noting the confusion on the teenager's face. He explained that they were heading to UA, where the principal would assess both his combat skills and his intelligence. The boy's eyes widened in surprise as he exclaimed the name of the principal, Nizu, a character of much debate regarding his true nature. Izawa raised an eyebrow, curious about how the boy knew so much, but decided to let it go for now. He asked for the boy's name, to which the teenager proudly introduced himself as Izuku Midoriya. With that, they set off toward UA, a small creature still napping atop Izuku's fluffy hair. As they jogged toward the school, Izawa felt a sense of calmness emanating from Izuku, likely due to the boy's affinity for cats, which seemed to flock around him. Izawa remained mostly stoic, occasionally glancing at the gathering cats and giving a few gentle scratches to those that approached him. They soon arrived at UA High School, the impressive structure not intimidating Izuku as he confidently walked alongside Aizawa. The building was quiet, with only a few teachers present, as the new school year had yet to begin. Aizawa noticed the respect and fear in the eyes of the teachers as they acknowledged him, while also casting curious glances at Izuku. Aizawa's presence kept them at bay, ensuring the boys' comfort. They reached a large door marked, "Principal's Office. Enter if you dare." Izuku, feeling adventurous, decided to enter. Aizawa had informed Nizu of their arrival, but as soon as Izuku turned the doorknob, he sensed something was off. Upon opening the door, he narrowly avoided a blade that whizzed past him, landing safely with his knees tucked up. Aizawa chuckled at the boy's quick reflexes. Izuku approached the blade embedded in the wall, carefully extracting it before returning to the office, where Nizu awaited. He calmly handed the weapon to the principal, stating, "I believe this is yours, Nizu-san." Nizu praised Izuku's impressive reflexes, agility, and analytical skills. He then requested Aizawa to leave them for a moment. Aizawa, already half asleep in his sleeping bag, made his way to the door and flopped onto the floor behind it, closing the door with a soft thud. Izuku raised an eyebrow at the sound, but Nizu reassured him that Aizawa would be fine. With that, Nizu shifted his focus to the business at hand. When Izuku stepped outside, a crowd of pro-hero teachers awaited him, intrigued by the boy whom Nizu, of all beings, had taken an interest in. As Izuku emerged, he and Nizu engaged in lively conversation, with Izuku occasionally muttering in a way that seemed increasingly unsettling, while Nizu responded with his characteristic mischievous laughter. Their camaraderie was evident, leaving the teachers feeling uneasy. First, Aizawa had brought this boy in, and now Nizu had formed a friendship with him. Izuku bore a striking resemblance to Aizawa, with dark green hair cascading over his face. The shadow cast by his hair obscured his eyes, revealing only a bright emerald glint from the darkness. His mutterings echoed Nizu's own playful laughter, amplifying the teacher's apprehension. When Nizu announced that Izuku would be training under both him and Aizawa, and that he was accepted based on recommendations, the teachers were left in shock. Nizu instructed Izuku to head to the training grounds for a sparring match with Aizawa. He acknowledged Izuku's impressive IQ of 314, suggesting that he could easily outsmart Aizawa, but encouraged him to rely solely on his physical abilities and quirk for the challenge. The teachers collectively gasped at the revelation of Izuku's extraordinary intelligence, surpassing even Nizu's own. Izuku nodded in agreement, expressing his reluctance about descending the stairs. Nizu smiled and granted him permission to proceed. The teachers were taken aback, realizing how well Nizu and Izuku seemed to understand each other. Izuku approached a nearby window, opened it, and effortlessly leaped out, landing gracefully on both feet and kicking up a small cloud of dust. The teachers rushed to the window, witnessing his flawless landing. He glanced back up, calling for Aizawa to join him. Aizawa grinned and jumped down after him. Curious about Nizu's whereabouts, Izuku inquired, and the principal emerged from Aizawa's scarf, giving a thumbs up to signal his presence. Aizawa and Izuku positioned themselves on opposite sides of the field, ready for battle. The setting resembled a Pokemon battle arena, with teachers observing from the sidelines, including Nizu, who watched quietly. The match commenced. Aizawa surged toward Izuku with remarkable speed, launching a punch. Izuku swiftly dodged to the side, and Aizawa landed on the ground. Without hesitation, Aizawa executed a roundhouse kick, which Izuku blocked with his fist. Aizawa continued his relentless assault, while Izuku skillfully dodged and blocked, carefully observing his opponent. Aizawa encouraged Izuku to show his true strength, his hair rising and scarf swirling around him. His eyes glinted red as he lashed out with his scarf, but Izuku narrowly avoided the attack by leaping into the air. Feeling relieved, Izuku thought about how close the encounter had been, but Aizawa smirked. Before Izuku could land, Aizawa extended his scarf again, capturing Izuku tightly and bringing him down to the ground. Aizawa then deactivated his quirk. Aizawa taunted Izuku, questioning where his earlier strength had gone. Suddenly, Izuku vanished, leaving everyone, including Aizawa, bewildered. Nizu watched with a knowing smile. As Izawa retracted his scarf, it revealed a small kitten with striking emerald eyes. The kitten meowed innocently, but then its expression shifted to something more sinister as it transformed into a massive white tiger, retaining those same bright green eyes. Izuku growled and charged forward, his powerful legs propelling him at incredible speed. His paws thudded against the ground as he extended his sharp claws. With muscles rippling beneath his white fur marked with black stripes, he leapt and pinned Izawa to the ground, baring his fangs in a threatening manner. Izawa quickly activated his quirk, nullifying Izuku's transformation and reverting him to his human form. Izawa acknowledged the shift in their battle style, and they prepared to engage in a traditional martial arts duel. They exchanged blows with remarkable precision, each strike met with a counter, each dodge followed by a swift kick or punch. The teachers watched in awe as the two fighters moved with such speed and skill that the actions appeared almost blurred. However, Izawa began to feel the pressure from Izuku's overwhelming force. Suddenly, Izawa flashed a confident grin and leaped into the air, his scarf swirling around him. He landed atop Izuku, knocking him down and quickly wrapping his capture tape around him while maintaining his quirk's effect. Izawa declared the match over, smirking at Izuku. He acknowledged Izuku's challenge, noting that while he had potential, there was still room for improvement. Izawa released his scarf, allowing it to return to its place around his neck as his hair fell back into place. Izuku stood up, dusting himself off. He then closed his eyes and struck a unique martial arts pose, leaving most of the teachers puzzled, though a few recognized the style. Upon opening his eyes, Izuku moved his palm outward, and the dust fell away. Izawa regarded him with newfound respect. Nizu informed Izuku that he would be entering UA through recommendations and would train under both him and Izawa until that time to enhance his skills. Feeling a sense of belonging, Izuku returned home, satisfied with his progress. He had found a place among those who understood him, and he eagerly anticipated returning the next day. After his fight with Izawa and meeting Nizu, Izuku went back home to his basement to rest in his green sleeping bag. However, sleep eluded him due to the nocturnal nature of some cats, resulting in only a couple of hours of rest. Izawa had instructed him to meet at Dagoba Municipal Beach at 1 a.m., knowing Izuku would be awake. After changing into a loose shirt and baggy briefs, Izuku jogged to the beach. Upon arrival, he found Izawa waiting. Izawa remarked on Izuku's tardiness, to which Izuku checked his phone and realized he was indeed late. Izawa's expression shifted to a grin that unnerved Izuku, reminding him of their last encounter where he had been bested. Izawa warned Izuku that the next 9 days would be grueling, as he intended to push him through intense training to prepare him for his role as a UA-recommended student. He emphasized that while Izuku had potential, it was far from limitless, and he would face even harsher challenges than those with zero potential. With a wide grin, Izawa declared that their training would commence. 9 days later, the day of the UA entrance exam arrived. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm glow over Dagoba Beach, where a young hero stood, breathing heavily and drenched in sweat. After tirelessly cleaning the beach for 9 days, he had not only transformed the area but had also endured relentless training sessions with Izawa. Each sparring match had ended in defeat for him, and he had learned to dread Izawa's smirks, knowing they signaled the start of a challenging session. It was now 4 a.m., and the UA entrance exam was set to begin at 8 a.m. Although he was a recommended student and technically did not need to attend, he was eager to observe the candidates and analyze their quirks. Izawa insisted on bringing him along, further motivating his decision. Over the past 9 days, the bond between him and Izawa had deepened. While they were not friends in the traditional sense, an idea that felt intimidating, he had come to view Izawa as a father figure, filling a void left by his own father's absence. His mother had often mentioned that his father was working overseas, but details were scarce, leaving him with a sense of longing. Izawa had stepped into that role, providing guidance and support. To shake off the fatigue, he slapped his cheeks and leaped onto a rooftop, bounding from building to building until he reached UA. Izawa had taught him this skill, which not only helped him avoid the crowds but also kept him away from the media. The press had been buzzing about the mysterious cleanup of Dagoba Beach, which had become a popular spot for couples and families. The idea of a guardian angel had captivated their interest, and he preferred to stay out of the spotlight, much like Aizawa. In addition to his training with Aizawa, he had been attending lessons with Nizu twice a day. They shared a unique understanding, both possessing intellects that set them apart. Their discussions often delved into strategies for dealing with villains, including how to handle hostages and navigate dangerous quirks. Nizu had also introduced him to the art of deception, teaching him how to read and influence the human mind. During one of their lessons, Nizu interrupted his thoughts. The young hero had been lost in contemplation, muttering to himself. Nizu's patient smile brought him back to reality, and he quickly apologized. Nizu then inquired if he planned to watch the exams, to which he nodded, sensing a plan forming in Nizu's mind. Nizu's eyes sparkled with excitement as he proposed an idea. He suggested that the young hero disguise himself as a candidate, allowing him to observe the other students up close. He could even take on the role of a faux villain to see how the candidates would react in a challenging situation. The young hero felt a grin spread across his face, thrilled at the prospect of the adventure. Nizu promised to inform President Mike, Aizawa, and the other proctors about the plan. However, he advised the young hero to adopt a more sociable persona, suggesting a stuttering, nervous character to better fit the mission. The young hero agreed, eager to embrace the challenge and make his mentors proud. As he glanced at the clock in the hallway, anticipation bubbled within him. It was almost time for the exams. He hopped down to the gates of UA and concealed himself in a nearby tree, ready to spring into action when the candidates arrived. He would catch them off guard, and he was certain this undercover mission would be an exhilarating experience. A few moments later, President Mike shouted with enthusiasm, asking if everyone was ready. Silence followed his question. Izuku quietly observed the scene, focusing on suppressing his muttering habits. He had a role to play and needed to be more prominent when the exams began. As President Mike explained the rules of the exam, a boy with dark blue hair raised his hand and interrupted with a question about the robots. Izuku struggled to contain his disdain for the boy's entitled attitude, especially since he didn't allow President Mike to finish speaking. Being a highly recommended student and a protege of Nizu and Aizawa, Izuku already knew what the exam entailed. After President Mike answered the question, the examinees were released into a vast sector filled with thousands of robots. Upon entering, Izuku spotted the arrogant boy and an upbeat girl. He approached them and made an effort to befriend them, then moved on to connect with other examinees as well. He gathered them together and proposed that they work as a team, emphasizing that collaboration was essential for true heroes. Ida, as Izuku learned was the brunette's name, found Izuku's insight impressive. Uraraka also agreed with him, and together, they all supported one another when the exam commenced. Izuku was effectively following Nizu's orders, waiting for the signal to turn the tables on his so-called friends. He felt a twinge of guilt for deceiving them, but it was fleeting as he helped his companions take down the robots. Suddenly, a siren blared throughout the city, announcing that there were 15 minutes left in the exam and that a final boss-level obstacle had been released, offering 20 points for whoever could defeat it. President Mick's voice echoed, amplified by his quirk. Izuku paused, a smirk forming on his face. This was the signal he had been waiting for. Uraraka glanced back at him, confused as she urged him to hurry. But as she noticed his grin, her expression shifted to concern. Ida turned around, and the others followed suit, sensing something was off. Izuku's grin widened, causing some of his companions to take a step back in surprise. Even other examinees approached to see what was happening. He looked each of them in the eye, revealing his true intentions. He declared that he had never been their friend and that he was the final obstacle. In an instant, Izuku transformed into a massive Siberian tiger, towering over the examinees. He let out a mighty roar that sent many fleeing in fear. Uraraka and Ida were visibly shaken. Izuku reveled in their shock, knowing they were hurt by his betrayal, unaware that this was his quirk. With another roar, he lunged at the examinees, careful to keep his claws sheathed to avoid serious injury. Nizu had instructed him to cause minimal damage to prevent UA from facing too many lawsuits, and he was aware of his own strength, having trained under Izawa and Nizu. Izuku swatted at the remaining examinees with powerful swipes, knocking them down repeatedly. Ida and Uraraka fled the scene, clearly overwhelmed by Izuku's transformation. They likely believed he was too formidable a challenge to confront. Suddenly, an explosion erupted in front of him, causing Izuku to stumble back. He opened his bright green eyes to see his former childhood friend and bully, Katsuki Bakugo. Katsuki's quirk allowed him to create explosions, and despite their tumultuous past, Izuku had always admired him. However, things had changed significantly since they last met a year ago. Izuku had developed not only a quirk but also incredible strength and a sharper mind. Grinning in his tiger form, Izuku shifted into a lion, letting his primal instincts take over. He charged at Katsuki, engaging in a fierce battle where he swiped and clawed, careful not to inflict serious harm, while Katsuki retaliated with explosive blasts. Both boys were enjoying the challenge, finally finding someone worthy of their efforts. In a climactic moment, Izuku charged at Katsuki, his powerful legs propelling him forward. Katsuki, breathing heavily, prepared to face Izuku's final attack. He shouted a fierce challenge, and Izuku roared in response. Katsuki combined his powers to create a massive explosion, declaring it his signature move. As the smoke cleared, Katsuki believed he had succeeded, but Izuku had swiftly dodged the attack, using the smoke as cover. With a triumphant roar, he pounced on Katsuki, landing heavily on him. Katsuki found himself pinned beneath the enormous lion, losing consciousness after Izuku unintentionally knocked the breath out of him. Recovery Girl approached, distributing healing gummies to everyone. She expressed concern when she reached Katsuki, then turned her attention to Izuku, who remained in his lion form. She admonished him, reminding him to be gentle with the other students. With a hint of frustration, she instructed him to transform into a more helpful form so they could carry Katsuki back to her office. Izuku felt a shiver of apprehension at Recovery Girl's sternness as he shifted into a large, fluffy snow leopard. Recovery Girl carefully placed the unconscious Katsuki on his back, and together they made their way to her office. As they walked, many examinees gazed at Izuku in awe, admiration, or even a touch of fear. Despite his size and the potential danger he represented, Izuku appeared endearing. His soft, light grayish-white fur was adorned with dark spots, and his bright emerald eyes sparkled with warmth. His plush tail swayed gently as he moved. Some examinees reached out to slide his fur, and Izuku welcomed the attention, understanding that it was part of his role to ease their nerves after the earlier chaos. A small crowd gathered, petting him and marveling at his fluffy yet strong appearance. Upon arriving at Recovery Girl's office, she sent the uninjured examinees away and focused on tending to Katsuki. Nizu and Izawa soon joined them, and Izuku provided a detailed account of the events. Afterward, he was instructed to stay up all night training with Izawa at UA grounds in preparation for the first day of school. Izawa led Izuku to the training grounds, despite his protests, and they began an intense training session. Eventually, they settled down for the night, sleeping side by side in their sleeping bags beneath the stars. Present Mike and Midnight spotted them in the early morning and captured some photos for their own amusement. When Izuku finally awoke, it was the first day of school. With a grin, he got up and headed to Class 1A, eager for the day to unfold. Izuku stood before the gates of UA, appearing as a nervous boy with green hair, but inside he felt a sense of pride for his clever ruse. He stumbled forward, feigning a shiver of anxiety, thinking to himself that this act would impress Nizu-sensei. He wanted to look like the stuttering, nerdy mess he used to be. As he walked, his foot unexpectedly hit a rock, providing the perfect opportunity for him to trip. Normally, he would have maintained his balance, but he had a role to play. He fell forward, bracing for impact, but it never came. When he opened his tightly shut eyes, he discovered he was floating in the air. A girl with brown hair and a round, rosy face hovered nearby, apologizing for using her quirk without permission. Izuku realized she must have a zero-gravity ability. It was time to lay on the awkwardness. He stammered his thanks, pausing to think of a name. He quickly settled on one. He introduced himself as Kaito Takashi, feeling pleased with his quick thinking. The girl smiled and introduced herself as Ochako Uraraka, asking if he was nervous. Izuku nodded, admitting that it was indeed overwhelming. She wished him luck with another bright smile before dashing off. He stood there for a moment, wearing a dazed expression, then glanced up at the UA building. He caught sight of Aizawa and 𝗎𝗓 looking down at him, and 𝗎𝗓 gave him a thumbs up. Internally, Izuku smirked, ready to begin his adventure. He entered classroom 1A, dragging himself through the door. The room was empty, as he had arrived 5 minutes before school opened, one of the perks of being the principal's prized student. He pulled out his green sleeping bag from seemingly nowhere, a skill he had mastered. Using the secret sleeping techniques Aizawa had taught him, Izuku climbed into his sleeping bag. He activated the gravity-defying snooze technique, placing his hands on the ground and feeling the sleeping bag lift toward the ceiling. To make himself lighter and smaller, he transformed into a kitten, ready for a quick nap before the day began. In his newer, more comfortable form, Izuku quickly drifted into sleep, feeling content. He remained unaware as his classmates entered the classroom, completely oblivious to his presence. Aizawa stood outside the door to class 1A, waiting for the students to notice him in his favorite special edition banana yellow sleeping bag. The students were engaged in lively conversation, unaware of the challenge that awaited them because he was their teacher. A sly grin appeared on his face as he anticipated the trials he would put them through. This was taking too long. Aizawa decided it was time to get their attention. He spoke up, stating that if they were going to socialize and fool around, they might as well leave. The class turned toward the new voice and instantly quieted. Observing their expressions, Aizawa recognized their thoughts. They were all thinking how strange he looked. He had seen those expressions enough times to know they found him unsettling. He took a sip from his juice, which only added to their startled reactions. "It took you all 5 seconds to quiet down," he remarked as he unzipped his sleeping bag and stood up to face the class. "You all need to be more practical. Welcome to UA Hero course. I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shota." He then instructed them to put on the P uniforms he had brought and meet him outside in the training field. Most of the students had regained their composure until Aizawa called out to Izuku, reminding him that his technique was taxing due to its advanced nature. The students looked up at the ceiling, their expressions mirroring their shock upon seeing Izuku. One student, looking bewildered, pointed at the floating green sleeping bag pressed against the ceiling, exclaiming about a giant mutant caterpillar. Aizawa replied nonchalantly that it was Izuku and urged him to wake up. A voice from the sleeping bag responded, and the students froze in surprise. The sleeping bag suddenly dropped to the ground with a soft thud, and a tired voice complained about the fall. The opening of the sleeping bag zipped open to reveal a tiny kitten with bright emerald eyes. The kitten looked up at Aizawa and asked what he wanted, leaving the class in shock. One boy questioned if it could really talk. Izuku, realizing he was still in kitten form, looked at Aizawa, who nodded in confirmation. Aizawa reminded him not to curse, though his tone lacked any real authority. Meanwhile, the girls in the class were cooing over the adorable kitten. A girl with pink skin and hair stepped closer, but Aizawa stopped her, explaining that Izuku was about to transform back and didn't respond well to being petted. As mist poured off of Izuku, reminiscent of All Might's transformation steam, the kitten began to grow. Fur was replaced by skin and clothing, ears vanished into a mop of long green hair, claws turned to fingers, and the tail disappeared. In place of the kitten stood Izuku, looking tired as usual. He greeted the class, earning even more astonished expressions. Izuku then introduced himself, clarifying that his real name was Izuku Midoriya, not Takashi. He glanced at Aizawa, who nodded for him to continue. Izuku explained his background to the class, detailing how he had been quirkless for most of his life until he discovered his quirk was blocked by certain barriers. After a year of intense training, he was able to access his quirk and break through those limits. He shared how he met Aizawa, who introduced him to 𝗎𝗓-sensei, the principal of the school. 𝗎𝗓 took him under his wing as his personal protege, and Aizawa also mentored him. Izuku revealed that he had gone undercover during the UA exams, adopting the persona of Kaito Takashi, to analyze the examinees while pretending to be their friend. He emphasized that he was a highly recommended student due to Izawa and Nizu's endorsement, making his admission to the school a given. Katsuki Bakugo woke up from his sleep, having missed the entire event because he deemed it a waste of time. When he opened his eyes and saw his childhood friend Izuku Midoriya, he felt a mix of shock and anger. Katsuki called out to Izuku, demanding to know what he was doing there. Izuku, surprising Katsuki by addressing him with his real name instead of the childhood nickname, replied that he was a highly recommended student, something Katsuki would have known if he hadn't been sleeping through the explanation. This newfound confidence in Izuku caught Katsuki off guard, fueling his frustration. How could that Deku stand in his way of becoming the #1 hero? And since when did he develop a quirk? The thought of Izuku hiding his abilities from him all this time infuriated Katsuki even more. Katsuki warned Izuku not to get in his way and stormed off toward the changing rooms, dismissing Izuku's growth as insignificant. To him, Izuku was just another obstacle, not worth his attention. Meanwhile, Izuku felt exhausted after all the explaining he had done. He slumped forward, resting his head on the podium, prompting concern from his classmates. Todoroki Shoto, a boy with dual-colored hair and a powerful quirk, stood up to check on Izuku. He reassured the class that Izuku was simply sleeping, which relieved them as they began to change into their PE uniforms. Despite his usual aloof demeanor, Todoroki found himself intrigued by Izuku. There was something about Izuku's bright green eyes and peaceful expression that captured his interest. Todoroki had always excelled in everything, but Izuku seemed to surpass him in ways he hadn't anticipated. Determined to uncover the source of Izuku's strength, Todoroki thought about the possibility of him being Aizawa's secret child. Regardless, he was resolved to surpass Izuku and understand his abilities. The class, including Izuku and Todoroki, gathered outside to meet their teacher, Aizawa. He informed them they would be assessing their quirks and confirmed that they had all completed their physical exams. When Aizawa called out to Izuku, he jolted to attention, ready to follow instructions. Aizawa directed Izuku to stand in the designated circle, signaling him to begin. As Izuku's arm transformed into a lion's paw, he prepared to throw the ball with impressive strength. Aizawa checked his tracker device and revealed the distance, 709.56 meters. He commented on the outdated practice of physical tests without quirk usage, explaining that they would be allowed to use their quirks to understand their limits. The class erupted in cheers, but Aizawa quickly dampened their excitement by warning that anyone who placed last would be expelled. The students were shocked, whispering among themselves about Aizawa's seriousness. Izuku, feeling the weight of Aizawa's reputation, nervously confirmed that their teacher was indeed strict and had expelled entire classes for lack of potential. Todoroki, determined not to lose to Izuku, resolved to see what he was made of. He prepared himself for the quirk apprehension test, vowing to defeat Izuku without relying on his left side, which he considered a burden. With a firm grip on his resolve, Todoroki readied himself for the challenges ahead, silently promising to show Izuku what he was capable of. The first event was the 50-meter dash featuring dekuwhatif and Tenya Ida. As soon as it began, Ida surged ahead with the power of his leg engines, achieving an impressive time of 3.4 seconds. Dekuwhatif hopped along, clocking in at 5.58 seconds. Next up were Aoyama Yuga and Mina Ishido, followed by Bakugo and Izuku. Izuku observed the competitors closely, noting Dekuwhati's frog-like abilities and the strengths and weaknesses of each participant. He thought about what it meant to be a hero, recognizing that while Aoyama had potential, he might struggle with his quirk and confidence. As Izuku muttered to himself, his classmates looked on, feeling a mix of admiration and apprehension. Bakugo, frustrated, called for Izuku to come forward so he could challenge him. Izuku, with a tired expression, complied and took his place at the starting line. When the signal was given, Bakugo launched himself forward, propelled by explosions, shouting about his speed. However, a green-eyed blur soon overtook him. It was Izuku, transforming into a cheetah and crossing the finish line in 2.89 seconds. The machine beeped, announcing his time, while Bakugo finished shortly after at 4.13 seconds. The crowd erupted in applause for Izuku as he shifted back to his human form, much to Bakugo's annoyance. He dismissed the praise, convinced that luck had favored Izuku this time. As the tests continued, Izuku excelled in every event, even surpassing Shoji's grip strength record by using his lion power to achieve a score of 570 kilograms. Finally, it was time for the ball throw, and Bakugo, feeling competitive, launched the ball with explosive force, achieving a distance of 705.2 meters. His classmates cheered, praising his impressive score. Aizawa, addressing Izuku, instructed him to step up for his turn. He warned Izuku that if he didn't give it his all, he would face serious consequences. Izuku, feeling the pressure, prepared himself. He focused intently, combining the strength of both a lion and a tiger, and threw the ball with tremendous force. The shockwave from his throw pushed back the students behind him, and he shattered the sound barrier multiple times. Aizawa, surprised by the result, revealed the distance, 1159.83 meters. The classroom fell silent with wide-eyed expressions all around. Bakugo, initially shocked, quickly transformed his surprise into anger, charging at Izuku with explosive energy. Aizawa prepared to intervene, but a knowing look from Izuku made him pause. As Bakugo lunged, Izuku sidestepped and effortlessly threw him to the ground. Bakugo, furious, shouted threats, but Izuku waited patiently until Bakugo's tirade slowed. He then calmly asked if Bakugo was finished, asserting that it was now his turn. Izuku, unimpressed, pulled out his phone and navigated to a fanfiction page, reading a comment that declared him a powerful force rather than a mere obstacle. He faced the audience, acknowledging the comment with a smirk. At this moment, the author, watching from the sidelines, reminded Izuku of their previous discussions about breaking the fourth wall. Izuku brushed off the admonition, insisting that he wouldn't promise to stay within the lines. With a determined look, he turned back to Bakugo, ready for whatever came next. Growling furiously, Bakugo opened his mouth to say something, but Izuku intervened. He explained that he understood how Bakugo had become who he was, given the praise he received for his quirk. However, Izuku asserted that he was simply stronger now. He expressed confusion over why Bakugo had stopped being his childhood friend and why he had started to bully him so harshly for being quirkless. Izuku declared that he was no longer the same Deku who had been beaten up in hallways and alleys, nor the same Deku who had been told to jump off the roof. He was more powerful now and intended to keep rising. Izuku got off Bakugo's back, and Bakugo stood up, brushing the dust off his clothes. One might expect him to feel ashamed or remorseful, but Bakugo was different. His eyes glared at Izuku with fury, and he was seething. However, with Aizawa present and feeling embarrassed for Izuku in front of the class, Bakugo retreated to the corner. Aizawa broke the silence, reminding everyone of his presence. He announced that they could do whatever they wanted for the last 20 minutes of school and then proceeded to pull out his sleeping bag from his scarf, stepping inside and zipping it up behind him. He quickly fell asleep. Ashido, the cheerful pink-haired student, suggested they introduce themselves, sharing their names, likes, quirks, and more. The rest of the class agreed with her enthusiasm. Since Izuku had already introduced himself earlier, he decided to join Aizawa in resting. He retrieved his own green sleeping bag and settled down next to Aizawa, quickly drifting off to sleep. The sight of the two cuddled up together evoked a collective thought of how cute they looked. Todoroki, however, found himself questioning why he felt that way, as he usually did not participate in class. Yet, he couldn't help but think that Aizawa and Izuku looked rather close. He noted that Izuku appeared especially adorable and peaceful while sleeping, and he pondered why he felt that way. Perhaps it was because Izuku was his rival, and he felt he was losing in the cuteness department. Determined, Todoroki resolved to train to be cuter at home to compete with Izuku. As the class went through their introductions, Izuku eventually woke up to find everyone had finished. The students began to pack up and leave, and it seemed that Uraraka wanted to approach him, but Ida stopped her with a shake of his head. They left together, which was fine with Izuku, as they had never truly been his friends. It had all been an act. Besides, he had training with Aizawa to focus on. Feeling a shiver of apprehension about what Aizawa would put him through, Izuku followed him to their training spot in the forest behind 𝗬𝗧𝗏. Reflecting on his classmates' performances, Izuku reminded himself to analyze their quirks with Nizu-sensei during their lessons. No one particularly stood out to him, except for the boy with white and red hair. Todoroki was intriguing, and Izuku was curious about why he didn't use both aspects of his dual quirk, which he understood to be ice and fire. Yet, Izuku felt something deeper than mere fascination. He wanted to help Todoroki overcome whatever trauma he was facing. He had learned about Endeavor's terrible reputation from reports he had seen with Aizawa and Nizu, as well as from observing Todoroki's behavior. Reassuring himself, Izuku concluded that he simply wanted to help, understanding the torment Todoroki likely endured. Aizawa called Izuku a problem child, indicating that they had a lot of training to do. Aizawa flashed his signature grin, and Izuku responded with one of his own, a grin that mirrored Aizawa's unique style. In a moment of slip, Izuku almost called Aizawa "Dad," quickly correcting himself. He thought he had saved himself, but Aizawa had noticed the slip. Surprisingly, Aizawa didn't seem to mind it at all. This chapter was special, filled with heartwarming moments between Izuku and Aizawa, and it played a crucial role in the storyline. Izuku launched a powerful punch at Aizawa, who skillfully spun his scarf around Izuku's arm, pulling him to the side and stepping away. Aizawa challenged him to utilize his training, prompting another attack from Izuku. When Aizawa suggested that Izuku master his scarf capture techniques, Izuku was unaware of the challenge that awaited him. Focusing intently, he stepped back, allowing his scarf to rise and spin around him gracefully. He then turned to Aizawa with a triumphant smile, but Aizawa merely smirked, raising his own scarf in response. The two engaged in a playful duel with their scarves, each one whipping through the air as they moved fluidly around each other, combining martial arts with their unique scarf techniques. After a brief but intense exchange, they broke apart, both breathing heavily, with Izuku noticeably more exhausted than Aizawa. Aizawa complimented Izuku's improvement, to which Izuku confidently declared that he would soon master the technique and surpass Aizawa. Aizawa grinned, reminding Izuku that the match was not over yet. In a swift motion, Aizawa's scarf ensnared Izuku, wrapping him up like a mummy, leaving only a tuft of green hair visible. Izuku protested, but his words were muffled. Aizawa acknowledged Izuku's progress while unwrapping him from the scarf. Izuku admitted that Aizawa was right and expressed gratitude, calling him "Dad," without realizing it. In a moment of shock, Izuku scrambled away, transforming into a cheetah and sprinting off, determined to escape the embarrassment of his slip-up. He glanced back to see Aizawa pursuing him, leaping from tree to tree with remarkable agility. Despite Aizawa's speed, he activated his quirk, causing Izuku's cheetah form to revert back unexpectedly. Izuku stumbled and fell, landing in the dirt. As he coughed up dust, he looked up at Aizawa, whose long hair obscured his face. Izuku stammered an apology, explaining that he hadn't meant to call Aizawa "Dad." He shared his feelings about his own father, who had never been present in his life. He expressed that Aizawa felt like the father he never had and apologized for the mistake. To Izuku's surprise, Aizawa placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, acknowledging that Izuku was like a son to him and that it made him happy to be called "Dad." Izuku was taken aback by this revelation. Aizawa then added, with a playful smirk, that it didn't mean he would go easy on him. Izuku reciprocated the smile, knowing Aizawa's competitive nature. They decided to call it a day and jogged back to 𝗬𝗧𝗏, where Izuku had a lesson with Nizu on important skills. Unbeknownst to them, they were being observed by present Mike and Midnight, who had their phones ready to capture the heartwarming moment. They giggled as they plotted their playful plans for Aizawa, envisioning a makeover that included a whimsical pink princess dress. As the chapter came to a close, it was shorter than usual, but it was filled with memorable moments that highlighted the bond between Izuku and Aizawa. The next day marked the beginning of a new school day at 𝗬𝗧𝗏 High School. Izuku found himself at 𝗬𝗧𝗏 early, having been urged by Aizawa for a morning training session. This session primarily involved Aizawa pushing Izuku to improve his skills with the scarf technique. Izuku had grasped the basics but needed to master various techniques before he could effectively utilize the scarf. He understood that arguing with Aizawa was futile, so he focused on his training. While lost in thought, Izuku began to mutter to himself, appearing quite comical as he was curled up in his green sleeping bag, slumped over his desk. To his classmates, he resembled a highlighter green caterpillar muttering away. His concentration was abruptly interrupted by a gentle poke to his side. A startled exclamation filled the air, prompting Izuku to unzip his sleeping bag, step out, and stow it away in his desk. He cast a weary glance at his classmates surrounding him. Uraraka stood nearby, gripping a long ruler tightly as if it were a shield. Iida was animatedly gesturing, clearly flustered by the situation. Even Todoroki, who sat calmly at his desk, showed a hint of curiosity. Izuku, in a monotone voice, broke the silence, which snapped everyone out of their shock. The class collectively muttered that it was nothing, avoiding his gaze. Suddenly, the bell rang, causing Izuku to shoot a disapproving look at the source of the sound. He glared at the narrator, expressing his disdain for the interruption. The narrator, hands raised in surrender, explained that the bell was on a break and that they had to step in. Izuku turned away from the fourth wall, pondering the oddity of the moment. The class, still processing the situation, realized that it was time for present mixed English class. Izuku marched out the door, and the rest of the class followed suit. When it was time for All Might's class, he burst through the door with his signature enthusiasm, announcing his arrival. The class erupted in cheers, excited to see their teacher. Denki remarked on All Might's Silver Age costume, while Mina expressed her excitement about having him as their teacher. Izuku, however, looked away, feeling indifferent. To him, All Might was not the hero he once idolized, as the man had nearly crushed his dreams of becoming a hero. The lack of recognition from All Might only deepened his doubts. All Might called for the students to meet him at Ground Beta for special hero battle training lessons, emphasizing the importance of costumes. He handed out locker numbers for the students to retrieve their outfits. As Izuku passed by, he snatched his locker number from All Might without acknowledging him. All Might watched him leave, bewildered by Izuku's behavior. He couldn't understand why this boy, who should be in awe of him, seemed so uninterested. Shaking off his confusion, All Might headed to the training ground, knowing he had a class to conduct. Most of the students finished changing and began complimenting each other on their costumes. Uraraka, still feeling the effects of Izuku's earlier antics, stumbled over her words as she noticed his absence. When she finally spotted him, she was startled to see him perched atop a street lamp, observing the scene with a calm demeanor. With a graceful leap, Izuku landed softly on the ground, casually remarking that they were taking too long. His costume was a dark jumpsuit equipped with a utility belt, reminiscent of Aizawa's but with unique touches. He wore a face mask covering his mouth and nose, and had two katanas crisscrossed on his back, along with a long sword at his hip. His utility belt held a small handgun, spare ammunition, knives, a grappling hook, and other essentials. Black fingerless gloves with metal plating adorned his hands, and he wore soundless black boots with steel tips. Though his costume was understated, it was practical for stealth. Many students approached him, admiring his outfit. All Might arrived to explain the day's activities. As he spoke, a student raised their hand, leading to a flurry of questions from the class. All Might chuckled, trying to manage the chaos with good humor. After his explanation, All Might revealed a small box that projected holographic images of the team matchups. The teams were as follows: Team A, Izuku Midoriya and Shoto Todoroki. Team B, Toru Hagakure and Mashiro Ojiro. Team I, Ochako Uraraka and Momo Yaoyorozu. Team D, Katsuki Bakugo and Mineta Minoru. Team H, Tsuyu Azui and Mizo Shoji. Team J, Kyuka Jairu and Denki Kaminari. Team G, Ejiro Kirishima and Tokoyami Fumikage. Team C, Mina Ishido and Koji Koda. All Might announced the upcoming matchups for the teams. Team A would face Team D, with Team D playing the role of villains. Team B would take on Team J, Team G would challenge Team I, and Team C would compete against Team H. All Might enthusiastically declared that the first match would be Team A versus Team D. He instructed the other students who were not participating to follow him to the monitor room to watch the fight. Only Izuku, Todoroki, Bakugo, and Mineta remained behind. Bakugo glared at Izuku, filled with determination and intensity. He directed his fierce energy toward Mineta, warning him not to interfere. Bakugo stormed off toward the building, with Mineta trailing nervously behind him, keeping a safe distance. Todoroki glanced at Bakugo before shifting his focus to Izuku. Unlike his usual demeanor, he felt no urge to dismiss Izuku. Instead, he found himself curious about his teammates' thoughts. Surprising even himself, Todoroki asked Izuku about their plan. Izuku's confident smile caught Todoroki off guard, causing his heart to race. He attributed the feeling to the excitement of the upcoming battle. Izuku revealed that he had a plan, assuring Todoroki that Bakugo and Mineta would not stand a chance. After Izuku explained his strategy, Todoroki nodded in agreement. They were already inside the building, waiting for All Might's signal to begin. Todoroki complimented Izuku, acknowledging his impressive planning and problem-solving skills, which made Izuku blush slightly in response. Suddenly, All Might's voice boomed through the loudspeakers, signaling the start of the match. Izuku and Todoroki exchanged determined glances and ventured into the corridors. Izuku anticipated Bakugo's arrival, knowing he would rush to confront him rather than work with Mineta. He recalled their earlier conversation about the plan. Izuku explained that Bakugo would come for him first, allowing Todoroki to create an ice blockade while he dealt with Bakugo. However, Todoroki insisted on facing Bakugo himself, stating he had something to discuss with him. Izuku hesitated but ultimately respected Todoroki's decision. An explosion interrupted their thoughts, signaling Bakugo's approach. Izuku warned Todoroki to prepare as Bakugo charged in, breaking through the ceiling with a powerful punch. He descended toward Izuku, ready to strike with explosive force. Unfazed, Izuku sidestepped and seized Bakugo's wrist just before he could land, preventing him from escaping. With a burst of strength, Izuku spun Bakugo and threw him to the ground. He quickly moved away, and before Bakugo could recover, Todoroki erected a thick wall of ice between them. Todoroki urged Izuku to hurry, knowing Bakugo would soon be back on his feet. Bakugo, frustrated, stood up and unleashed his fury on the ice barrier, determined to reach Izuku. Bakugo's voice echoed with rage as he declared his intent to chase down Izuku. Todoroki, resolute, stood his ground, stating that anyone who wanted to get to Izuku would have to go through him first. Bakugo, fueled by his competitive spirit, accepted the challenge, ready to unleash his explosive power. Todoroki observed the situation, noting that Bakugo had not yet proven to be much of a challenge. While Bakugo possessed considerable power, his temper and attitude suggested he would be better suited as a villain than a hero. Midoriya's voice came through the earpiece, informing Todoroki that he had located the bomb on the 4th floor. Though many might describe Midoriya's tone as tired and monotone, Todoroki found comfort in it. There was a soothing quality to his voice that instilled confidence. Bakugo, filled with fury, shouted at Todoroki, demanding to know why he was smiling. Todoroki acknowledged that he had momentarily lost his focus. He responded to Midoriya, confirming his message, before turning his attention back to Bakugo, who was preparing for another attack. Bakugo charged at him with a fierce yell, and Todoroki countered by launching a column of ice in his direction. Bakugo dodged and closed the distance, but Todoroki evaded his explosive punch and retaliated with a powerful blow to Bakugo's stomach, sending him stumbling back. Todoroki questioned Bakugo about his animosity toward Midoriya, recalling their childhood friendship and noting how Midoriya flinched at Bakugo's aggression. Bakugo's anger intensified at the inquiry, vehemently declaring that Midoriya was a quirkless loser and always would be. Todoroki frowned at Bakugo's words, pointing out that Midoriya did indeed have a quirk and that it didn't explain the flinch. Bakugo interrupted, stepping back and surprising Todoroki. Bakugo announced that he would change tactics, crouching and raising one arm. He mentioned that his gauntlets should contain nitroglycerin, which could lead to a devastating explosion. Realizing the potential danger, Todoroki warned Bakugo not to proceed, but Bakugo was undeterred, pulling the pin and shouting in defiance. Todoroki felt a surge of determination, releasing a massive amount of ice to counteract the explosion. The two forces collided, creating a whirlwind of icy wind and embers. With focused effort, Todoroki managed to encase the explosion in ice, neutralizing the threat and releasing only a harmless puff of smoke. Bakugo stood in shock, and Todoroki seized the moment to inquire again about his relationship with Midoriya. Bakugo, regaining his composure, questioned Todoroki's concern for Midoriya, revealing his past cruelty towards him. He admitted to making sure Midoriya understood his place, which only fueled Todoroki's anger. As realization dawned on Todoroki, he felt a wave of rage wash over him. He confronted Bakugo, accusing him of hurting Midoriya and recognizing the scars that mirrored his own past. Bakugo smirked, but Todoroki's intensity caught him off guard. The atmosphere shifted as Todoroki embraced his fury, causing Bakugo to falter. With swift determination, Todoroki closed the distance between them, unleashing his power. He struck Bakugo, who staggered back, and followed up with a decisive kick. Todoroki hissed that this was for Midoriya, delivering another punch that initiated a chilling transformation. Ice began to creep up Bakugo's body, and despite his struggles, he found himself unable to escape. As Bakugo pleaded, a tear escaped his eye, breaking through Todoroki's focus. The ice halted its advance, and Todoroki reflected on his actions, feeling no remorse for what Bakugo had done to Midoriya. He spat out an apology, the words tasting bitter, and turned to leave. Before disappearing around the corner, he glanced back at Bakugo, who appeared terrified. The corridor lay in ruins, with evidence of their battles scattered throughout. Todoroki muttered an apology to All Might for the damage caused as he hurried up the stairs, thoughts of Midoriya filling his mind. He recognized the pain and betrayal hidden behind Midoriya's eyes, mirroring his own struggles. Clenching his arm in response to a bruise from Bakugo's earlier attack, he resolved to protect Midoriya, understanding the depth of their shared experiences. With a renewed sense of determination, the character hurried up the stairs to the 4th floor, where Izuku had indicated the bomb was situated. They felt a strong urge to reach Izuku quickly, expressing their intent to join him in the mission. Izuku finally peered around the corner, spotting the bomb he had been searching for. To his surprise, Mineta was stationed nearby, seemingly guarding it. However, the purple-haired boy was more focused on lamenting his situation. Mineta expressed his frustration, lamenting his unfortunate pairing with Bakugo against 2 of the top 3 strongest students in their class. He wished for a chance to simply enjoy the view of the girls instead. Izuku decided to interrupt Mineta's complaints, stepping out from his hiding spot. Mineta turned to him, bewildered. Izuku informed Todoroki through their radio connection that he had located the bomb on the 4th floor. Todoroki's voice came through the earpiece, acknowledging his report. The sound of Todoroki's calm voice was oddly comforting to Izuku. Mineta, noticing Izuku's slight blush, questioned him about it. Izuku was taken aback, realizing he was indeed blushing. Mineta, with a mischievous glint in his eye, suggested that Izuku was thinking about the girls. Izuku quickly denied it, dismissing Mineta's assumptions. Mineta, however, insisted that he was more than just a pervert. He declared his longing to become a hero, hoping to impress the girls. Izuku couldn't help but admire Mineta's determination, even if his reasons were less than noble. As the tension built, Izuku prepared for battle, swiftly moving toward Mineta. He kicked Mineta lightly, sending him crashing against the wall. Izuku felt a bit guilty for using too much force, but he reminded himself that Mineta was not a serious threat. Mineta groaned as he struggled to get back on his feet. Izuku warned him that defeat was inevitable and that he was only prolonging the inevitable. He reminded Mineta that Bakugo would not come to his rescue. Mineta, fueled by his resolve, insisted that he could fight too. Izuku was surprised by the fierce determination in Mineta's eyes. He began to reconsider his initial judgment of him. Mineta proclaimed that he was a pervert with a dream of becoming a hero, which made Izuku chuckle. He acknowledged Mineta's ambition, even if it stemmed from a rather unusual motivation. As Mineta began to reveal his thoughts on girls, Izuku quickly interrupted him, not wanting to hear any more. Mineta, however, seemed to take delight in teasing Izuku about his innocence, claiming he had discovered his weakness. Izuku was taken aback, feeling a mix of embarrassment and frustration. He lamented his situation, shaking his fists at the ceiling as he questioned why he had to be so innocent. He even addressed the unseen author, expressing his discontent with this supposed weakness. Mineta laughed, reveling in Izuku's discomfort. He reassured Izuku that girls found innocent boys like him endearing, which only added to Izuku's embarrassment. As the playful banter continued, Izuku attempted to rise and confront Mineta, but he quickly realized that he was restrained by Mineta's sticky ball. Despite his efforts to break free, he found himself unable to move. Mineta reveled in his victory, taunting Izuku as he celebrated his cleverness. Just then, a voice called out to Izuku, assuring him that help had arrived and that he didn't need to worry. Mineta recognized the voice immediately. It was Todoroki. He expressed his surprise that Bakugo had not managed to defeat him. Todoroki, with a sharp tone, questioned Midoriya about his strength and how Mineta had managed to overcome him. Midoriya felt a wave of shame as he admitted that Mineta was quite perceptive and had discovered his weakness. Todoroki, intrigued, asked for clarification on this weakness. Mineta, with a mischievous laugh, revealed that Midoriya's innocence was his vulnerability, and he had managed to incapacitate him with just a hint of a certain topic. Midoriya, overwhelmed by the memory, cried out in distress, emphasizing the pain it caused him. Todoroki processed this information, realizing that even the slightest mention of that topic could hurt Midoriya. With only 20 seconds remaining, Mineta gleefully declared his intention to stall them. Panic set in as Midoriya urged Todoroki to focus on securing the bomb instead of freeing him. Todoroki, sensing the gravity of the situation, became serious. He declared that no one should inflict pain on Midoriya, as he had vowed to protect him. With determination, he charged at Mineta, who was suddenly reminded of Todoroki's formidable strength. With a battle cry that echoed Midoriya's name, Todoroki encased Mineta in a block of ice. Turning back to Midoriya, Todoroki hesitated but ultimately decided to prioritize the mission. He rushed to the bomb, placing his hand on it and ensuring their victory. The announcement of their win echoed through the speakers, prompting them to gather in the monitoring room to discuss the battle. After freeing Mineta and helping Midoriya up, Todoroki acknowledged him with a nod. Midoriya, curious about Todoroki's earlier declaration of protection, asked for clarification. Todoroki smiled warmly, a rare sight that contrasted with his ice quirk. He explained that they shared similar past experiences and that he wanted to ensure Midoriya's safety, having learned about his struggles from Bakugo. Midoriya's expression shifted at the mention of Katsuki, and he expressed concern about being judged for his past. Todoroki quickly reassured him, expressing his respect and longing to protect him. He then offered to walk Midoriya home from school, to which Midoriya agreed, feeling grateful. As they exited the building, their shoulders brushed against each other, and this time, neither flinched away from the contact. Izuku reflected on the day as he entered the boys' locker room to change out of his hero suit. He and Todoroki had performed admirably, with Todoroki being named the MVP, thanks in part to Izuku's unfortunate weakness. The other matches had been somewhat predictable, but Izuku remained attentive, as Aizawa and Nizu had instructed him to observe his classmates and compile reports on their strengths, weaknesses, quirks, and overall capabilities. Nizu emphasized that this analysis would help the students improve, and he recognized Izuku as one of the most impressive minds he had encountered. After changing into his UA uniform, Izuku stepped outside to find Todoroki waiting for him. Aizawa's decision to cancel that afternoon's training had allowed Izuku to walk home with Todoroki. Todoroki greeted Izuku, and they walked along the pathway in silence. Izuku noticed Todoroki stealing glances at him, only to quickly look away when Izuku turned his head. Izuku chuckled to himself, thinking that everyone had their quirks. After a prolonged silence, Izuku broke the quiet, asking if Todoroki also needed to go home. Todoroki's expression darkened, and his fists clenched as he expressed a longing to delay his return home. He mentioned wanting to avoid something, and Izuku sensed the tension in his voice. While he could tell something was troubling Todoroki, he chose not to pry, respecting his classmates' privacy. Todoroki interrupted Izuku's thoughts, pointing out that he had been mumbling again. Izuku apologized, admitting it was a habit of his. They continued walking, with Izuku leading the way to his house. Suddenly, Todoroki halted, staring at Izuku with wide eyes. Izuku inquired about his sudden stop, but Todoroki simply mumbled the word, cat. Confused, Izuku reached up to touch something warm and fluffy on his head. It was 𝗵𝗃, the black cat he had adopted earlier. 𝗵𝗃 responded with a soft, mrrr, and Izuku playfully asked what he was doing up there. 𝗵𝗃 seemed to demand more attention, and Izuku acknowledged that he would try to include him more in their conversations. Todoroki, feeling a bit ignored, reminded Izuku of his presence. Izuku quickly apologized, explaining that he had been talking to 𝗵𝗃. Todoroki expressed surprise at Izuku's ability to communicate with cats, to which Izuku clarified that it was a result of his quirk, allowing him to connect with feline creatures. As they continued walking, Izuku asked if they could stop at a nearby supermarket to pick up 𝗵𝗃's favorite food. Todoroki agreed, and they headed toward Vinny's supermarket. As they approached the store, an authoritative voice called out to them. It was Iida, who greeted them. Izuku responded with a sleepy tone, which Todoroki found reminiscent of Aizawa. Iida acknowledged Izuku's earlier actions during the entrance exams, expressing respect for his skills and a longing to be friends to learn from him. Izuku accepted Iida's offer of friendship, and 𝗵𝗃 chimed in, reminding everyone of his presence. Iida, intrigued, asked if he could pet 𝗵𝗃. Izuku consented, and Iida gently stroked the cat's soft fur. 𝗵𝗃 purred, leaning into Iida's touch, which surprised Izuku since 𝗵𝗃 usually reserved his affection for a select few. Iida shared that he had 2 cats at home and loved them dearly. As he continued to pet 𝗵𝗃, Izuku smiled genuinely, a sight that caught the attention of both Todoroki and Iida. They both noted how bright and endearing Izuku's smile was. Izuku suggested that they could become good friends and invited Iida to join them at the supermarket. Iida agreed, mentioning he needed to pick up cat food for his own pets. The trio then entered the supermarket together. Izuku, Todoroki, and Iida had barely stepped into the store when the manager rushed toward them, visibly distressed. He exclaimed in a panic, pointing accusingly at Iida and Izuku. He claimed they resembled Tensei and Shota, noting Izuku's messy hair and tired eyes, and Iida's neat glasses and sophisticated dark blue hair. The manager's demeanor shifted from anger to desperation, as if haunted by a troubling memory. He insisted they were not welcome in his store and demanded they leave immediately. Iida, confused and determined, tried to reason with the manager, expressing their intention to purchase cat food. The manager interrupted, recalling past incidents that seemed to fuel his outrage. Todoroki, puzzled by the commotion, questioned the situation, but the manager remained adamant that they should exit the premises. With a forceful shove, he pushed them toward the door, slamming it shut behind them and standing guard. Izuku, taken aback by the encounter, wondered aloud what had just happened. Iida speculated that the manager might have known his brother and Aizawa-sensei, recalling the manager's mention of a family resemblance to Aizawa. Izuku quickly clarified that he was not related to Aizawa, merely sharing a similar appearance. Despite their confusion, they realized the manager's hostility posed a problem, as they still needed cat food, and the nearest supermarket was too far to walk. Todoroki listened as Izuku and Iida discussed their options. They concluded that since the manager had specifically targeted Iida and Izuku, Todoroki could venture into the store without issue. Izuku declared this plan as if he had uncovered a brilliant solution, and Iida enthusiastically agreed, feeling as if they had stumbled upon a great discovery. 𝗵𝗃, their feline companion, seemed to share in their excitement, eagerly anticipating the spicy tuna deluxe. As if they were eager to retrieve the tape and glue that he likely had in his school bag, Iida urged Todoroki to step inside and take on the role of their ambassador, messenger, and savior. Todoroki nodded in agreement, assuring them that he understood the task. He returned from the store with a bag filled with spicy tuna deluxe, which 𝗵𝗃 responded to with an appreciative meow, drooling slightly. Izuku declared the mission a success, And after a brief discussion, the three boys parted ways, each destined to become close friends. They would be inseparable, destined to be known as the next big three of UA. 𝗍𝗂 then posed a rather unusual question to Izuku, asking him how to eliminate someone in a particularly brutal manner. Izuku met his gaze and responded without a moment's hesitation, detailing a series of grim actions. 𝗍𝗂, pleased with the response, acknowledged Izuku's dedication to his studies. However, Aizawa, who had been listening nearby, interjected, questioning 𝗍𝗂's choice to teach such topics. 𝗍𝗂 defended his stance, expressing his belief in the importance of such knowledge, despite the objections from the Board of Education for Heroes. Izuku chimed in, agreeing with 𝗍𝗂, and mentioned that understanding the darker aspects of life could be beneficial. As he trailed off, lost in thought, 𝗍𝗂 let out a cackle, which prompted Izuku to join in, both laughing maniacally. Aizawa observed the scene with a sense of foreboding, realizing that the two were becoming increasingly alike. He muttered to himself, bracing for what promised to be another long day. Kaminari, known as Pikachu, wondered aloud why Aizawa-sensei had asked them to come out in their hero suits. Mina, the pink alien girl, shrugged and suggested that perhaps Midoriya might know. Both Kaminari and Kirishima turned to Izuku with hopeful expressions. However, Izuku simply shook his head and began to walk away, stating he wasn't going to participate. Mina called after him, asking if he had any insight, but Izuku dismissed her with a gesture. Mina concluded that he definitely knew something. Kaminari protested, expressing their collective confusion, but Kirishima reassured him that they would find out soon enough. Just then, Aizawa approached the group and announced that they were heading to a special simulation building for training on natural disasters and rescue efforts. A bus pulled up and he instructed everyone to get on. Izuku climbed aboard and chose a seat at the back, hoping to distance himself from the others. However, when Iida and Todoroki sat down next to him, he found it wasn't too bothersome. As the bus started its journey, Aizawa had kept details about their destination vague, only mentioning it was called the USJ, where they would train for disasters in a simulation. Izuku knew exactly where they were headed but decided to keep it a secret for the sake of excitement. The class engaged in light conversation, occasionally interrupted by Aizawa's reminders to keep the noise down. Azui then asked Izuku about his quirk, prompting the rest of the class to quiet down in anticipation. It seemed everyone was curious about his abilities. Izuku explained that his quirk allowed him to transform into any animal from the feline family, ranging from domestic cats to big cats like tigers and lynxes. He could also shift into different ages and partially change his form. Additionally, he had a unique connection with cats, who regarded him as their king, and he could communicate with them. The class listened in awe, with Kirishima expressing admiration for Izuku's impressive quirk, while he downplayed his own ability to harden his body. Izuku offered to help Kirishima explore potential modifications to his quirk, which thrilled Kirishima. Their handshake revealed the roughness of Kirishima's hands, prompting him to inquire about any scars. Bakugo, who had been keeping to himself, slightly lifted his head at the question. Izuku recoiled, quickly retracting his hand and denying any scars. His expression darkened, revealing a hint of discomfort as he seemed lost in troubling memories. Kirishima, concerned, reached out to him, but Izuku snapped at him to keep his distance, realizing his reaction was unwarranted. He apologized, admitting to feeling a bit uncomfortable at that moment. Izuku reflected on his past traumas, recalling the bullying he had endured from Katsuki and his friends, as well as the isolation from those who ignored his struggles. His thoughts cast a shadow over the conversation, leaving Kirishima and the others feeling uneasy. Iida attempted to smooth over the situation, bowing apologetically, while Uraraka reassured him that it was fine. Suddenly, Aizawa's voice cut through the tension, announcing their arrival. The students exited the bus and were greeted by the pro hero 13, who excitedly welcomed them to the USJ, the unforeseen simulation joint. Uraraka expressed her excitement, revealing 13 was her favorite hero. 13 clarified that the USJ was not a theme park but a training facility for natural disasters and rescue operations, featuring various terrains for their simulations. The class exchanged glances, amused by the resemblance to a theme park. Ida respectfully inquired about All Might's absence, to which 𝗬𝗏 explained that he was delayed but would join them later. After some further explanations, Izuku's attention was drawn to a purple misty portal that opened behind 𝗬𝗏 and Aizawa. He instinctively crouched into a defensive stance, his hair falling over his eyes. Aizawa noticed Izuku's reaction and asked what was wrong. As he turned to assess the situation, the portal widened, and villains emerged. Mina excitedly remarked on the presence of fake villains, but Aizawa quickly corrected her, stating they were real. 𝗬𝗏 instructed the students to take cover, spreading their arms protectively. Aizawa muttered a readiness for battle, and Izuku nodded in agreement, preparing for the confrontation ahead. Breathing heavily, Izuku tied quirkless up with some ropes he found along the wall of the USJ, likely left there for rescue purposes. He then rushed over to 𝗬𝗏, who was lying on the ground, clearly in distress. Concerned for 𝗬𝗏's well-being, Izuku asked if he needed help. 𝗬𝗏, in evident pain, urged Izuku not to worry about him but to assist Eraserhead instead. Following 𝗬𝗏's instructions, Izuku sprinted over to Aizawa to lend a hand. Aizawa was managing well against the villains, having significantly reduced their numbers, but fatigue was beginning to set in. Suddenly, a villain leaped out from behind him, brandishing a large claw. The villain shouted with glee, but Aizawa turned just a moment too late. Before the villain could reach him, Izuku soared through the air and delivered a swift kick to the villain's face, sending them crashing to the ground. Aizawa, surprised and somewhat irritated, questioned Izuku's presence. He continued to fight, landing a punch to one villain's gut and an uppercut to another's jaw, all while warning Izuku that he wasn't safe. Izuku explained that 𝗬𝗏 was down, the students were scattered, and he had sent Ida to UA to alert them of the situation. He insisted that 𝗬𝗏 had instructed him to assist Aizawa, and he felt it was not the time for complaints. As he spoke, he executed a roundhouse kick to a villain with an extra eyeball. Reluctantly, Aizawa agreed to Izuku's presence. A villain with an oversized head shouted a threat, but Aizawa swiftly countered with a kick to their head. Izuku shot back, pointing out that Aizawa was only conceding because he knew Izuku was right. Just then, a villain attempted to catch Izuku off guard, but he back-kicked her without even looking. Aizawa dodged a villain's acid strike and retaliated with a dropkick as he landed. The two continued to fight with renewed vigor, exchanging banter amidst the chaos. One villain, confused by the duo's antics, questioned how they could argue while facing a horde of villains. Another villain, 𝗵𝗃𝗲, chimed in, claiming to be a villain too, albeit with an unfortunate quirk. Aizawa and Izuku simultaneously stomped on the puddle, silencing it. A large beast-like villain approached, shouting a warning as he struck the ground with tremendous force, creating a fissure that threatened Izuku and Aizawa. Izuku expressed his discomfort with the situation and suggested a plan. Aizawa agreed, darting toward the beast, who roared in challenge. Aizawa delivered quick jabs, evading the beast's clumsy swings. Meanwhile, Izuku took advantage of the distraction and threw a knife at the villain, which embedded itself in the beast's back. The villain howled in pain, clawing at the injury. Aizawa seized the opportunity to jump up and level himself with the beast's head. At the same moment, Izuku transformed into a tiger and leaped toward the villain's head. Together, they executed a powerful kick, knocking the beast unconscious. The remaining villains gasped in shock at their defeat of 𝗵𝗃𝗲 and began to flee. However, a menacing voice interrupted their escape. It was Shigaraki Tamura, furious at the loss of one of his puppets. A misty villain, quirkless, attempted to calm him, reminding him that 𝗵𝗃𝗲 was merely a pawn and that his defeat changed nothing. Izuku pointed at quirkless, expressing disbelief that he had managed to escape. Quirkless explained that he had used his mist to slip free from the ropes. The handy guy, surprised by quirkless' defeat, acknowledged Izuku's strength, noting his ability to transform into large cats. Aizawa, determined to confront Shigaraki, charged at him with his fist drawn back. Shigaraki simply commanded a monstrous creature, the 𝗵𝗏, to intervene. The 𝗵𝗏 intercepted Aizawa's blow, sending him stumbling back as if he had struck a wall. Shigaraki ordered the Nomu to eliminate Aizawa. Aizawa attempted to use his scarf against the Nomu, but the creature effortlessly sliced it in half. Engaging in close combat, Aizawa's strikes connected, but the Nomu remained unfazed. The Nomu retaliated, sending Aizawa crashing into the wall with a powerful strike. As Aizawa lay weakened, he struggled to understand the Nomu's power. Just then, Izuku transformed into a lion and tackled the Nomu, pushing it back slightly. Shigaraki was taken aback by Izuku's strength. The Nomu growled and charged at Izuku, who attempted to deflect its punch. However, the Nomu's strength was overwhelming, and it slammed Izuku into the wall, leaving him injured. The door creaked open as Shigaraki stepped into the small, dim room. Izuku was chained to the wall, wearing anti-quirk cuffs that prevented him from using his abilities. Shigaraki casually addressed him, asking how he was doing. Izuku looked up from his messy hair, glaring at the villain with tired, bloodshot eyes. He retorted that it was Midoriya, not Izuku, and expressed his frustration at being tortured for the past 2 weeks. Shigaraki smirked, enjoying the boy's defiance. When Izuku remained silent, Shigaraki taunted him about his lack of response. Izuku, feeling defeated, simply asked him to get on with it, knowing that torture was the reason for Shigaraki's visit. However, Shigaraki surprised him by stating that there would be no torture today. Izuku, confused and weak from lack of food and water, questioned what Shigaraki meant. The villain explained that he had something special planned that would make Izuku join their side. Izuku firmly declared that he would never become a villain. Shigaraki dismissed his words, insisting that the heroes had forgotten about him and would not come to rescue him. Izuku, still holding on to hope, reiterated that the heroes would find him. In response, Shigaraki struck Izuku in the gut, causing him to gasp for breath. Shigaraki then revealed a syringe, uncapping it and grabbing Izuku's arm. Despite Izuku's protests, Shigaraki injected him with the serum, which caused him immense pain. As Izuku writhed on the floor, Shigaraki unchained him and dragged him into a cage on the opposite side of the room, slamming the door shut. Izuku's body began to contort and shift, transforming into a large creature that was part Siberian tiger, part lion, and part panther. Scars marked its body, and its emerald green eyes flashed with anger. Shigaraki gleefully explained that this transformation was Izuku's true potential and that he would now be under Shigaraki's control as long as he continued to receive doses of the serum. Izuku, now in his hybrid form, growled defiantly, refusing to submit to Shigaraki's will. As Shigaraki backed away, he used a controller to deliver a painful shock to Izuku, causing him to collapse to the floor. With his eyes slowly closing, Shigaraki declared that he would control Izuku, leaving him in darkness as the door swung shut. Weeks passed, and Izuku had been trapped in his animal hybrid form for 3 weeks, making it a total of 5 weeks since his capture. The heroes had not come for him, and he had not heard from his friends. Despite this, Izuku clung to hope, though he felt himself slipping into despair. 𝗬𝗓𝗁, a somewhat kinder villain, approached Izuku and inquired if he had yet agreed to join them. Izuku shook his head, firmly stating that he would not join. 𝗬𝗓𝗁, maintaining his polite demeanor, sat down in front of him and offered food, which Izuku rejected, insisting that he was not a dog. 𝗬𝗓𝗁 asked what Izuku considered himself, and Izuku reflected on his hybrid nature, acknowledging the mix of animal genes within him. 𝗬𝗓𝗁 nodded in understanding before announcing it was time for exercise. Unlocking the cage, 𝗬𝗓𝗁 attached a leash to Izuku's collar and led him out. They traveled through a warp gate to an abandoned location, ensuring Izuku would not recognize where he was. Suddenly, 𝗬𝗓𝗁 received a phone call and, after a brief conversation, informed Izuku that there had been an incident at the base. He would be leaving Izuku behind for a moment. 𝗬𝗓𝗁 chained Izuku to a broken fence before quickly opening another portal and disappearing. Seizing the opportunity, Izuku pulled against the weak fence, managing to break free. Although his collar remained, he knew this abandoned building well from his childhood with Katsuki. Determined, Izuku set off toward UA, confident that his friends and Aizawa would recognize him despite the lingering effects of the serum. Izuku sprinted away, vaulting over the fence and racing into the woods. His legs struck the forest floor with determination as he propelled himself forward with remarkable speed. He felt his muscles awakening, tingling and urging him onward. He focused on the thought of moving faster, pushing himself to his limits. After what felt like an eternity of running, Izuku spotted the UA building in the distance. A surge of victory filled him as he realized he was almost there, though he was breathing heavily. Suddenly, a wave of pain surged through his body, causing him to gasp and slow down, yet he continued to run. He realized that Shigaraki must be activating the shock collar. He couldn't afford to stop now, he was so close. With determination, Izuku pressed forward, battling against the overwhelming pain. He spotted Aizawa speaking to the class on the dusty training field where they had first tested their quirks. Struggling to breathe, Izuku leaped over the fence, clearing it with effort. However, he stumbled and fell, the pain overwhelming him. The entire class, including Aizawa, stepped back in alarm. Izuku looked at them with pained green eyes, desperately seeking help. Aizawa, recognizing him, acted swiftly. He pulled an iron bar from his utility belt and swung it toward the collar around Izuku's neck, breaking it just before making contact. The electric sparks that had surrounded Izuku began to fade, but he was still gasping in agony. Aizawa urgently called for an ambulance, and Uraraka quickly responded, assuring him she would take care of it. With immense effort, Izuku expressed his gratitude, whispering a weak thank you before losing consciousness. Izuku awoke to the sound of a persistent beeping. As he opened his eyes, he attempted to sit up but winced in pain, collapsing back onto the hospital bed. The heart monitor beeped loudly, prompting nurses to rush into the room, checking his vitals and exclaiming excitedly that he was awake. Izuku thought to himself, surprised by their reaction. He had never considered himself particularly good-looking. Suddenly, a deep voice interrupted his thoughts, causing the nurses to freeze and back away in fear. A peculiar creature, resembling a banana, slithered down from the ceiling and approached Izuku's bedside. It perked up as it reached him, revealing Aizawa's tired face. "Hello," Aizawa whispered, his voice a mix of sleepiness and concern. Izuku hesitated before speaking. Aizawa encouraged him to call him Dad, which made Izuku feel a mix of comfort and confusion. He had questions swirling in his mind. He asked where he was, what had happened, and why his head felt strangely lighter. Aizawa's expression shifted to one of guilt at the last question. "You're in Mizudafu General Hospital. You've been unconscious for a week since the villains attacked you at UA. We're not entirely sure what they did, but we never stopped searching for you," Aizawa explained. The villains set up decoys, and with the sports festival approaching, many of the teachers were busy, myself included. Izuku processed this information, then suddenly remembered the upcoming UA Sports Festival. His excitement quickly turned to pain as he exclaimed, causing nurses to rush in with needles to help ease his discomfort. "Yes, the UA Sports Festival is just around the corner. You still have time to prepare, as it has been postponed for 3 weeks due to your health," Aizawa reassured him, helping to calm Izuku's nerves. Relieved, Izuku sighed in gratitude, thankful for the extra time to recover. Izuku reminded Aizawa about the strange sensation he felt in his head, prompting a guilty expression from Aizawa. He hesitated before explaining that Izuku had sustained a significant injury, which required the doctors to take certain measures for treatment. Izuku, growing impatient, urged Aizawa to be straightforward. Understanding how sensitive Izuku was about his hair, Aizawa felt a pang of concern. He decided it would be better to show Izuku rather than tell him, so he handed over a mirror and stepped back. Izuku gazed at his reflection, his eyes widening in disbelief. His hair had been cut short, leaving only a shaggy tuft on top, which was also shorter than before. This change revealed his sharp jawline and handsome features, making his emerald eyes shine even brighter. It became clear why the female nurses had been so captivated by him, as they crowded against the glass door, trying to catch a glimpse while leaving foggy imprints behind. Turning towards Aizawa, Izuku seethed with frustration, his anger palpable as he muttered under his breath. Class 1A was buzzing with chatter when Aizawa burst through the door, carrying a peculiar green object under one arm. He commanded silence, and the students quickly settled down. Aizawa approached Izuku's desk and set the green object down before addressing the class. He announced that they would be doing something special in heroics class and advised them not to disturb Izuku, who was feeling a bit irritable. As soon as Aizawa left the room, Izuku's friends gathered around the green object, knowing from experience that it was Izuku himself. They bombarded him with questions about his well-being and recent events. Izuku's tired voice emerged from the bundle, requesting them to leave him alone. Kirishima, however, encouraged him to come out, and Izuku reluctantly explained that he had grown attached to his long hair, which had been cut for medical reasons. His friends quickly understood the emotional weight behind his words. Encouraged by their support, Izuku finally agreed to emerge from his hiding place. As he unzipped the sleeping bag, the class turned their attention to him. Stepping out, Izuku folded the bag neatly and stored it away. He brushed himself off and looked at his classmates, who were taken aback by his appearance. The rest he had received in the hospital had refreshed him, and his new hairstyle accentuated his features, making him look both charming and striking. The class was visibly affected by his transformation, with many blushing and some even struggling to contain their reactions. Todoroki felt a rush of warmth, while Kirishima and Ida also showed signs of fluster. The girls, including Mina, Uraraka, and Momo, were equally affected, their faces flushed. Apologizing for not warning them about his new look, Izuku scratched the back of his neck sheepishly and bowed, earning a proud nod from Ida. Uraraka stammered her surprise, while Momo echoed her sentiments, clearly impressed by Izuku's transformation. Suddenly, Aizawa burst through the door, announcing his return to the class. He paused, taking in the scene before him. He instructed everyone to stop staring at Midoriya and to take their seats for English class with present mic. The students reluctantly complied, though many continued to sneak glances at Midoriya, who remained blissfully unaware of the attention. Aizawa couldn't help but think that Midoriya was often oblivious to the world around him. He wiped a bead of sweat from his brow and handed the class over to present mic. With enthusiasm, present mic entered the room, ready to energize the students. Aizawa decided it was best to exit before he became fully awake, making a quick escape into the hallway. Present mic grinned at the class, eager to begin the lesson. Izuku sighed as he settled into his comfortable chair back in his room. After another tiring day at UA, his ears still rang from present mic's lively teaching style. Surprisingly, present mic was an excellent English teacher, ensuring that no one dozed off during his class. Izuku turned his chair toward his desk and opened his laptop. He logged onto his YouTube channel and was astonished to see that he had gained 2 million subscribers in just 1 week. He couldn't believe the growth of his channel. What many didn't know was that Izuku was a gifted singer. During his quirkless days, he had started a YouTube account as a way to express himself. To his surprise, he discovered he had a talent for singing, leading to an impressive subscriber count of over 47.9 million. He donned a mask he had crafted to keep his identity a secret. The mask was entirely black, with bright green accents around the eye holes. After logging in, he began recording. He introduced himself as the Bush and announced the song he would be singing, encouraging viewers to check out his latest album. He apologized for his brief absence, hinting at some complications but assuring everyone that everything was fine now. He then launched into the song. After finishing, he wrapped up the video, edited it, and uploaded it. Almost immediately, he received thousands of likes and a flood of comments, leaving him amazed at the rapid response. The next morning, a voice announced the start of the day in a rather lackluster manner. At UA, excitement buzzed in the air as Kirishima enthusiastically shared his thoughts on the Bush's latest song, prompting a lively discussion among the class. Bakugo chimed in, expressing his admiration for the music. To everyone's surprise, Todoroki also revealed that he listened to the Bush, sharing how the music had helped him through difficult times. Ida turned to Midoriya, curious if he listened to the Bush as well. Izuku hesitated but confirmed that he did, and Ida accepted his response without further questioning. As the bell rang, the class stood and moved toward the door, only to be met by a large crowd of UA students outside. Kaminari stumbled back in shock at the sight. Izuku explained that the crowd was sizing up the competition, and he stepped forward to confront them. A purple-haired student with tired eyes addressed the group, lamenting the sight of Class 1A squabbling among themselves. Bakugo reacted angrily to the student's words, but the student remained unfazed, revealing that he had also aspired to join the hero course but had been placed in a different one due to circumstances. He declared that if any of them performed well in the upcoming sports festival, they might be considered for a transfer into the hero course. Izuku met the student's gaze, unimpressed. He dismissed the declaration of war, asserting that it held no weight against him. A student from the crowd challenged him, but Izuku chuckled darkly, causing the crowd to take a step back. He confidently declared himself the top student among all first-year classes, asserting his superiority in power and intelligence, and flashed a confident grin. The crowd murmured in fear and parted as Izuku walked through them. Most of the students looked apprehensive, but Class 1A had grown accustomed to Izuku, so they were less startled. Aizawa appeared suddenly, causing the crowd to step back in recognition. He warned them not to mess with Izuku, sending a chill through the students. Ida quietly expressed his confusion, noting Aizawa had addressed Midoriya by his first name. Aizawa continued with a grin, mentioning that Izuku was his and Nizu's personal student. This revelation shocked both Class 1A and the crowd, increasing their apprehension towards Izuku, knowing how intimidating Aizawa and Nizu could be. Aizawa then sternly reminded everyone that they should be in the cafeteria for lunch, prompting a flurry of eeps and gasps as the crowd dispersed, scrambling to get to the lunchroom. On the day of the sports festival, Class 1A was in their locker rooms changing. Izuku stood in a corner, changing cautiously to avoid being seen. Kirishima approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder, which startled Izuku. Kirishima was taken aback by the scars on Izuku's body, particularly a prominent one on his left arm. He expressed concern about the extent of Izuku's injuries from encounters with villains. Izuku reassured him that it was fine, quickly pulling his shirt over his head before anyone else could see. Todoroki, quietly changing in the corner, wore a serious expression, as if he were ready to confront anyone who had harmed Izuku. Midnight announced Class 1A from the stadium, and the audience erupted in cheers. Kaminari rallied the boys to join the girls at the entrance. Together, Class 1A marched into the stadium, greeted by a roaring crowd. Midnight introduced the other classes, but their cheers were not as enthusiastic. She then called Izuku to the stage, urging him to say a few words as the class representative. Izuku approached the podium and monotoned a greeting, expressing hope that everyone would give their best. He then grinned, adding that he looked forward to a challenge and hoped not to be disappointed. The first-year UA students felt a mix of fear and excitement at his confidence, while the audience cheered in approval. Midnight announced that the first challenge would be an obstacle course, where students had to reach the end as quickly as possible while overcoming 3 obstacles. The students gathered in the tunnel, waiting for the gate to open, pushing against each other in anticipation. Finally, the gates began to open, and the students surged forward. Present Mike, in the announcer's booth, leaned forward with excitement, declaring the UA Sports Festival officially underway. The crowd was taken aback as Izuku shifted back into his normal form just as Todoroki crossed the finish line, with Bakugo close behind. Izuku chuckled, thanking Todoroki for the ride. Todoroki remarked that he had sensed something was off when he hadn't seen Izuku. Izuku playfully mentioned that he had been inside Todoroki's jacket, which had been comfortable until the frostbite from Todoroki's ice powers affected him. He suggested using fire to counteract the frostbite, but Todoroki responded seriously, stating he would never use fire for personal reasons. Present Mike announced the results, declaring Izuku as the first-place winner, followed by Todoroki and Bakugo. He continued to call out the names of the students as they crossed the finish line. Izuku noticed Momo breathing as she finished, with Mineta clinging to her back. Momo shot him a furious glare, while Mineta grinned mischievously, only to be met with a swift retaliation. Present Mike announced the conclusion of the previous event, much to the audience's relief. Midnight then explained the next challenge, the cavalry battle. When she mentioned that first place would earn 1 million points, a significant lead over the second and third places, all eyes turned eagerly toward Izuku. He smiled slightly at the thought of the challenge ahead. Izuku approached Midnight with his usual tired expression and asked if he needed to form a team, expressing doubt that anyone would want to join him. Midnight informed him that while forming a team was recommended, it was not mandatory. Izuku nodded in understanding. As the contestants began to form teams, Izuku remained in the corner, seemingly determined to go solo. Midnight observed him with a hint of concern, wondering about his choice. She then announced that it was time for the cavalry battle to commence. The newly formed teams turned their attention to Izuku, who leaned against the wall with an unimpressed look. Despite his demeanor, many students, including some boys, gazed at him with admiration. Just as several teams prepared to charge at him for the million-point headband, Izuku stood up and transformed into a massive hybrid of a Siberian tiger and a lion. He let out a powerful roar, challenging anyone to approach him. The teams halted, momentarily stunned by his transformation. Izuku growled, questioning their intentions with a deep, resonant voice. The teams slowly backed away, continuing their battles elsewhere while maintaining a safe distance from him. A few teams attempted to approach, but retreated quickly when Izuku took a menacing step forward. Izuku expressed his disappointment at the lack of challenge, wondering where the bravado from the classroom had gone. Then, a team stepped forward, led by a purple-haired student. The student introduced himself as Hitoshi Shinso, the same individual who had challenged Izuku previously. Izuku greeted him, prowling with a predatory grace. Shinso complimented Izuku on his quirk and status in the hero course, implying that Izuku must have had an easy life filled with friends and popularity. Izuku felt a pang of discomfort at Shinso's words, recognizing that he was unaware of the struggles he had faced. He realized that Shinso was trying to provoke a response, and he needed to be cautious. Izuku concluded that Shinso's quirk likely involved communication, prompting him to avoid direct conversation and eye contact. He focused on clearing his mind, employing the meditation techniques taught by Aizawa. Shinso continued to taunt him, questioning his courage and resolve, but Izuku remained silent. Shinso began to doubt himself, wondering if he had figured out Izuku's strategy. In response, Izuku lunged at Shinso's team, narrowly missing them with his powerful claws. He charged again, this time successfully grabbing some of Shinso's headbands. The team scrambled to escape, retreating into the fray of the cavalry battle. After dropping the headbands in his corner, Izuku lay down, patiently awaiting the next challenger brave enough to approach him. Shinso's group managed to accumulate enough points to qualify for the next round. Bakugo's team secured third place, while Todoroki's team took second, both boys eager to defeat Midoriya by claiming his 1,000,000 points. However, they soon realized they barely escaped him with their headbands and ultimately conceded. Midoriya claimed first place once again, much to the crowd's excitement, as it was rare for a single student to achieve first place in 2 events. Suddenly, Aizawa's voice echoed through the speakers from the announcer's booth, low and menacing. He warned Izuku that if he continued to underperform in the next event, he would significantly increase his training regimen and make him run laps around the stadium. The audience and contestants were stunned, realizing that Midoriya had not been giving his all. Izuku felt a wave of panic wash over him, sweat beading on his forehead as he promised Aizawa that it would not happen again. Aizawa's narrowed gaze prompted Izuku to sheepishly correct himself, calling Aizawa "Dad," which shocked everyone present, as only a few knew of their relationship. Aizawa acknowledged Izuku's slip and urged him to give at least 60% in the upcoming events. With that, silence fell over the crowd. Present Mike then announced the start of the one-on-one battles, revealing the matchups on the big screen. Izuku felt a thrill of excitement when he saw Shinso Hitoshi next to his name, anticipating an interesting match. As Izuku prepared for his fight, Todoroki approached him, pulling him away from the crowd into a quiet corner. With a serious expression, Todoroki asked if Izuku was the secret child of Aizawa. Izuku, taken aback, quickly denied it, insisting Aizawa was merely a father figure. Todoroki, skeptical, pressed on, asking if Izuku understood what a quirk marriage was. The atmosphere shifted as Izuku's demeanor changed, and he confirmed that he did. Todoroki shared his own background, explaining that he was born from a quirk marriage between 𝗕𝗏𝗏 and his mother, who had suffered greatly due to 𝗕𝗏𝗏's obsession with creating the perfect successor. He recounted the harsh training he endured and the trauma his mother experienced, revealing that he had overheard her expressing her disdain for his left side, which resembled 𝗕𝗏𝗏's. Todoroki's expression turned fierce as he declared his intent to win the sports festival without relying on his father's power. As he turned to leave, Izuku called out to him, asserting that he too had faced a difficult childhood and would not back down easily. With determination in his eyes, Izuku challenged Todoroki to give his all as well. Todoroki nodded in acknowledgement and walked away without looking back. Izuku sensed Bakugo lurking nearby, having overheard their conversation, but he chose to focus on preparing for his battle instead. The first match was about to commence, and Present Mic's voice boomed through the stadium, igniting excitement among the crowd. He introduced Shinso Hitoshi, noting that he hadn't made a significant impact yet. Shinso entered the arena with a serious expression. Present Mic then announced Midoriya Izuku, the adoptive son of Eraserhead, also known as Aizawa Shota. He highlighted the rigorous training Izuku had undergone, hinting at the challenges he had faced. Suddenly, Aizawa interrupted, pulling the microphone cord apart, demanding that Mic refrain from discussing his relationship with Izuku. Present Mic, slightly flustered, realized he could still project his voice without the microphone and resumed his enthusiastic introduction of Izuku. The crowd erupted in cheers as they awaited his entrance. However, instead of the expected hero, a bright green caterpillar rolled out, coming to a stop at Shinso's feet. Aizawa smirked, recognizing Izuku's clever use of a support item. He whispered to Present Mic, who quickly understood the situation and shared a knowing smile. Midnight, looking puzzled, poked the green bundle with her 𝗕𝗏𝗏, questioning its identity. Present Mic confirmed that it was indeed Midoriya. Midnight hesitantly initiated the match, and the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Shinso stared at the unmoving lump, bewildered by its inactivity. Minutes passed, and frustration began to mount as he demanded to know what it was. Just then, the lump sprang to life, announcing itself as Midoriya Izuku, much to Shinso's astonishment. Shinso, still in disbelief, asked about the peculiar situation. The caterpillar explained that it was a high-tech sleeping bag, equipped with advanced features. Shinso was taken aback by the revelation, questioning the robotic voice and the absurdity of the situation. Midoriya, revealing his past struggles, shared the pain of being quirkless and the challenges he faced growing up. His voice, though robotic, carried a weight of emotion as he expressed his determination to prove himself. Shinso felt a wave of empathy wash over him, realizing the depth of Izuku's hardships. As Midoriya transformed, mechanical tendrils emerged, elevating him into a formidable machine. He declared that this was not personal but a necessary approach due to his fatigue. Shinso, now terrified, questioned how this could be considered an easy way to fight. The mechanical legs moved with surprising agility, and in a swift motion, they knocked Shinso out of the stadium, leaving him unconscious. Midnight announced Midoriya as the winner, her voice tinged with shock. Present Mic was left speechless, his expression one of disbelief, while Aizawa smirked knowingly. He explained to Mic that this was the result of a sleep-deprived student utilizing a family technique. The crowd, initially stunned, erupted into cheers, marveling at the unexpected display of power from a determined young hero. Shortly after the match, Izuku returned to the balcony, plopping down into a seat between Ida and Todoroki with a sigh. Instantly, everyone shifted away, glancing at him with expressions of concern. The three engaged in conversation in a manner that seemed unusual to others. Ida bombarded Izuku with various questions, while Todoroki answered them instead. Occasionally, Izuku would chime in with his casually indifferent tone. As the next matches began, Izuku pulled out his notebook, muttering rapidly as he furiously scribbled notes, as if his life depended on it. A few words could be caught, something about the contestants' weaknesses and tactical strategies. The class edged further away from him. A voice from the other side of the wall boomed, laughing loudly. Izuku gave a bored side glance and noticed a wild-looking blonde hanging over the wall with an unsettling grin. The boy cackled again, swinging his arms in an exaggerated manner. He declared that most of the Class A students were too small to be of interest to the lowly Class B students, but he found Izuku intriguing, claiming he was sadistic and cruel, just like himself. Izuku stared at the blonde, who stared back. Amidst the thick tension, Momo began to make a high-pitched sound, while Ojiro prepared to run. The class watched closely, knowing their unpredictable classmate could act at any moment. Finally, after a few tense seconds, Izuku stood up. A few of his classmates gasped as he approached the blonde. He extended his hand in greeting, and the blonde accepted it, shaking it with respect. Izuku introduced himself as Midoriya Izuku, and the boy replied, introducing himself as Minoma Nito. Izuku then offered a small slip of paper, suggesting they plot something mischievous together. Minoma accepted it, returning Izuku's smirk. The class, now alarmed at the thought of Izuku having a partner in mischief, looked on in shock. Ida began to quietly calculate potential damages, while Tokoyami started an odd chant, hoping for some sort of intervention. The newly formed duo giggled, confirming Class 1A's suspicions. Suddenly, Minoma choked, his laughter abruptly ceasing as he went limp. Everyone watched in morbid fascination as his body was slowly pulled back over the wall, and moments later, an orange-haired girl popped up, apologizing for him before quickly disappearing. Everyone stared at the wall in silence until Tokoyami shouted in excitement. During intermission, Izuku wandered the halls aimlessly when All Might appeared, popping out of a trash can and startling him. Izuku narrowed his eyes, questioning what All Might wanted. The hero, noticing Izuku's strength, proclaimed that he believed Izuku was worthy of inheriting his power, one for all, and would become the next symbol of peace. All Might spread his arms wide, taking up the entire hallway, confident that Izuku would accept the offer. He envisioned Izuku as a remarkable young hero in training who would see the greatness of such an opportunity. However, Izuku firmly rejected the offer, stating that he would never accept it. All Might's confidence faltered as he asked why. Izuku expressed his frustration, recalling how All Might had dismissed him as a quirkless child and how he would not accept power from someone who had overlooked his dreams. Realizing who Izuku was, All Might pieced together the past incident involving the sludge villain. Izuku confirmed his identity, feeling exasperated. All Might attempted to convince him again, but Izuku, with determination in his eyes, declared that he did not need All Might's power to become a hero. He wanted to prove to himself and the world that he could achieve greatness on his own. With newfound confidence, Izuku walked away, leaving All Might stunned and speechless. As he made his way to his room to prepare for his next match with Todoroki, a large, rough hand stopped him. Turning, he found himself face to face with 𝗕𝗏𝗏, the number 2 hero. 𝗕𝗏𝗏 acknowledged Izuku, insisting that he convince his son, Shoto, to use his fire side in the upcoming match, claiming that Shoto needed to 𝗕𝗏𝗏 to surpass All Might. A serious expression crossed Izuku's face as he confronted 𝗕𝗏𝗏, demanding that he act like the number 2 hero he was supposed to be. Surprised by Izuku's boldness, 𝗕𝗏𝗏 was momentarily taken aback. Izuku challenged him, questioning why he insisted that Shoto must surpass him. He expressed his awareness of 𝗕𝗏𝗏's past actions and vowed to help Todoroki reach his full potential, regardless of 𝗕𝗏𝗏's wishes. As Izuku's determination filled the air, he made it clear that he would not comply with 𝗕𝗏𝗏's demands. Izuku was determined to help Shoto move on from the troubled life that had been imposed upon him. He firmly believed that Shoto was not merely a creation or a pawn to be manipulated. He was Shoto Todoroki, a person who belonged to himself. Izuku's voice echoed against the walls as he expressed his frustration. With a decisive turn, he stormed into his preparation room, leaving behind a furious 𝗕𝗏𝗏. 𝗕𝗏𝗏's initial shock quickly morphed into humiliation, which then ignited into a blazing anger. He couldn't fathom how Izuku had the audacity to speak to him about his own son. Fueled by rage, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Nedzu! 𝗕𝗏𝗏 growled, his voice thick with fury. He demanded that Izuku Midoriya be expelled from the hero course. After a brief pause, he was met with unexpected resistance. "What do you mean, what?" Nedzu, the hallway fell silent as 𝗕𝗏𝗏 stormed away, his footsteps leaving a mark on the ground. Around the corner, Todoroki stood, clutching his heart as he processed the intense exchange between his father and Izuku. A new feeling stirred within him, and he softly acknowledged, "He's a true friend." He whispered to himself, pondering the unfamiliar sensation. With his hands tucked into his pockets, he slowly walked away. Moments later, as 𝗕𝗏𝗏, Midoriya, and Todoroki departed, a locker nearby burst open, and Shinso Hitoshi emerged, gasping for breath. He had witnessed everything and heard every word exchanged, including Todoroki's heartfelt statement. Shinso narrowed his eyes, feeling a mix of confusion and determination. He recognized that he was an outsider in this situation, but one thing was clear: he would not allow anyone to harm his precious friend. It didn't matter if Todoroki had feelings for Izuku, he was committed to protecting him. From the stands, Todoroki observed with wide eyes, his usual aloof demeanor replaced by surprise. He thought to himself that he would never wake Midoriya again, fully aware of the consequences that could follow. Poor Shinso, he mused. As if on cue, Izuku's mechanical creation shrank back to its normal size, its mechanical legs folding into the green caterpillar bag. The caterpillar then made its way toward the exit, the crowd still cheering in admiration. Bakugo experienced a moment of embarrassment. Shinso's perspective shifted 4 hours earlier. He felt a sharp pain as he regained consciousness, gripping his head and blinking to adjust to the light. He found himself in a bed in Recovery Girl's office, recalling that he had been defeated by a peculiar sleeping bag caterpillar robot. Recovery Girl approached him, asking how he felt after the intense match. He replied that he was simply tired, feeling far from his best. She acknowledged his fatigue, reminding him that it was natural given his insomnia. After a brief conversation, she released him, cautioning him to take it easy. As he walked out, he reflected on the match against Midoriya Izuku, who had proven to be a formidable opponent during the cavalry battle. Lost in thought, he spotted Midoriya walking down the hallway. Midoriya's striking emerald eyes caught Shinso's attention, and the dark circles beneath them hinted at a shared struggle with insomnia. Shinso admired Midoriya's handsome features, which were more pronounced now that his hair was cut shorter. As Midoriya passed by, Shinso felt a flutter in his chest, realizing he had developed a crush. Finding solace in a locker, Shinso settled in, attempting to rest. However, he overheard a conversation between Midoriya and a harsh voice that he soon recognized as 𝗕𝗏𝗏. The tension in the air was palpable as 𝗕𝗏𝗏 urged Midoriya to convince his son, Shoto, to embrace his fire abilities, claiming it was essential for his growth. Midoriya's response was filled with frustration as he confronted 𝗕𝗏𝗏, challenging his authority and past actions. Shinso felt a surge of admiration for Midoriya's courage in standing up to the number 2 hero. As the conversation unfolded, Shinso realized that Midoriya was not just a strong fighter but also a complex individual with a rich history. He sensed that beneath Midoriya's tough exterior lay a boy yearning for acceptance and support, someone who, despite his strength, needed to be nurtured. Shinso narrowed his eyes, recognizing that there was much more to Midoriya Izuku than met the eye. Deep down, he understood that Midoriya was reaching out for someone to help him, even as he continued to save others. Shinso had made a decision. From Shinso's perspective, it was clear that the upcoming week would be filled with updates, as he had promised his followers. He felt grateful for reaching over 100 followers and was excited to take requests for future chapters. He intended to explore different themes based on what his readers wanted, hoping to please everyone. As the story unfolded, the tension between the Todoroki and Shindika fans was palpable. Each side had their concerns about which pairing would prevail, and Shinso found himself at a crossroads, needing to make a choice that would satisfy some while disappointing others. He knew that whatever direction he took would evoke strong reactions. The arena buzzed with excitement as the announcer introduced the next match. The crowd erupted in cheers for Todoroki Shoto, the son of the renowned hero 𝗕𝗏𝗏, as he approached the fighting area with a calm demeanor. The cheers intensified when Midoriya Izuku stepped into the ring, his expression revealing a mix of fatigue and boredom. With a decisive signal, the match began. Todoroki immediately unleashed a wave of ice, aiming to freeze Izuku as he had done with another competitor. However, Izuku's quick reflexes allowed him to evade the attack effortlessly. Todoroki expressed his longing to end the match swiftly to avoid hurting Izuku, but Izuku countered, insisting that Todoroki needed to unleash his full potential. Todoroki hesitated, determined to prove himself without relying on his father's power. Izuku urged him to embrace his own abilities, prompting a realization in Todoroki. Flames ignited on his left side, melting away the ice that had formed. A genuine smile spread across Todoroki's face as he prepared to unleash his full strength. As the battle escalated, Izuku recognized that he, too, needed to give everything he had. He began to transform, his body shifting into a powerful beast form reminiscent of the feline family. This transformation, forced upon him by villains in the past, was both a source of strength and painful memories. Yet he vowed to match Todoroki's intensity. With a mighty roar, Izuku charged forward, ready to confront Todoroki. The two opponents unleashed their powers in a spectacular display of flames and ice, creating a whirlwind of energy that captivated the audience. Izuku leaped into the air, aiming to close the distance between them. Todoroki summoned a massive surge of ice and fire, releasing it toward Izuku. The force of the attack was tremendous, and even 𝗵𝗵𝗲 struggled to erect barriers to contain it. An explosion rocked the arena, leaving Todoroki on one knee, exhausted, while Izuku seemed to have vanished. Panic and disbelief washed over Todoroki as he wondered if he had truly defeated Izuku. Present Mike voiced his shock, while Aizawa, ever the stern mentor, called for Izuku to reveal himself and finish the fight. From above, a familiar voice responded, and the crowd turned to see Izuku, transformed into a giant beast, leap down onto the arena floor. The audience gasped in astonishment, and Todoroki's eyes widened in disbelief. Izuku explained that he had harnessed the incredible jumping abilities of his Puma Cat powers, allowing him to navigate the debris created by Todoroki's attack. He had cleverly used the floating chunks of concrete to remain within the bounds of the ring. As the crowd watched in anticipation, Izuku began to change shape once more. To everyone's surprise, he transformed into a tiny black kitten, mewing playfully as he approached Todoroki. The arena held its breath, eager to see what would happen next. The kitten liked Todoroki's face. Todoroki fainted. Midnight announced that Todoroki was unconscious and declared Midoriya Izuku the winner. She lifted the kitten into the air, and the crowd cheered for the little creature, who liked its paw innocently and playfully batted at its ear. Endeavor was taken aback. Izuku strolled down the street after purchasing some food for 𝗵𝗵𝗲. That cat was quite particular, demanding only the finest, high-quality delicacies. Despite this, Izuku couldn't resist 𝗵𝗵𝗲's adorable antics, so he spent his week's allowance at a different supermarket. As he scrolled through Wattpad, he noticed a new story titled, "Quirkless Doesn't Mean Powerless," posted by LazyAnimaniac, and felt compelled to read it. Suddenly, a loud explosion interrupted his thoughts. A villain cackled, proclaiming that he would never be caught alive. He knocked over several fruit baskets while fleeing with a large bag of money, declaring himself the great Baby Master. A hero interrupted, announcing the infamous villain. The villain scoffed in irritation, insisting he was the great infant nator and demanded the hero get it right. The hero, undeterred, reported the situation over a walkie-talkie, stating that the Baby Master was back. The villain stomped in frustration, repeating his name, but the hero continued to call him the wrong title. Fed up, the villain turned and fired a shot at the hero, who vanished in an instant. In that split second, Izuku thought about the potential of a teleportation quirk when, poof, Izuku disappeared. Aizawa happened to be on patrol when he witnessed the chase between the Baby Master and a new teleportation hero. The villain turned and fired a laser, hitting Izuku with his quirk and shrinking him down to the size of a 1-year-old child. The Baby Master fled, and the hero continued the pursuit. Aizawa jumped down from his perch and rushed toward Baby Izuku. Frustrated, Baby Izuku stomped his tiny foot and looked up at Aizawa, trying to wobble toward him. He exclaimed that he had been hit and that his intelligence was fading. He wanted to convey an important message, but suddenly he stopped talking. Izuku felt a pang of concern. "Izuku, are you still there?" Baby Izuku looked up, giving Izuku an adorable smile. Izuku's heart raced. Any other time, he would have cherished that smile, but this was a troubling situation. He thought to himself that Izuku didn't smile like that normally. "Izuku, please tell me you're still you." Baby Izuku only smiled wider and giggled, making baby sounds. Izuku face-bombed, realizing the gravity of the situation. He looked down at the child, who gazed back innocently and reached out with tiny hands. Izuku corrected himself, muttering a more appropriate phrase. Baby Izuku gurgled in approval, and Izuku decided they needed to get to Yue, hoping Nizu could resolve this predicament. At Yue, Izuku explained the situation to Nizu, who listened thoughtfully. On the outside, Nizu maintained his usual calm demeanor, but inside he was in turmoil. How could his most promising and fierce student have been turned into such an adorable baby? Nizu cleared his throat and informed Izuku that the villain's quirk would wear off by the end of the day, meaning Izuku would need to care for baby Izuku for the time being. He suggested assigning a student to look after him during class. Izuku gazed down at the baby in his arms, feeling an unexpected attachment to the little one with fluffy green hair and curious green eyes. He hesitantly asked if he could stay with Izuku to ensure his safety. Nizu smiled warmly, understanding Izuku's concern. However, he warned that Yamada and Kayama would likely take full advantage of the situation. Izuku groaned, acknowledging the potential chaos that awaited him. With baby Izuku cradled in his arms, he made his way toward Class 1A's homeroom, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Everyone in Class 1A was engaged in lively conversation, some speculating about Midoriya's whereabouts, when the door suddenly swung open. The students quickly took their seats, falling silent, their backs straight and hands neatly folded on the table. Izuku entered, cradling a baby with fluffy green hair in his arm. He addressed the class, stating he had important news to share. The sight of the baby caught everyone off guard. The class erupted with questions about the infant, who bore a striking resemblance to Midoriya. Izuku's eyes glowed red, and his black hair floated ominously, commanding silence. Once the class quieted down, Izuku explained that the baby was Midoriya, who had been affected by an age regression quirk and would remain a baby for the day. He mentioned that Nizu had instructed someone to stay with baby Midoriya, and he would oversee the class as a shadow to ensure everything went smoothly. The class held its breath in anticipation as Izuku revealed the name of the caretaker. Bakugo thought he would be chosen because he was Midoriya's childhood friend. Todoroki believed he would be selected due to his sense of responsibility. Izuku concluded with Shinso Hitoshi. The class gasped in shock, with a few students expressing their surprise more loudly than others. Shinso entered, his usual tired expression softened as he looked at Izuku. He greeted the class before gently taking the baby into his arms. Izuku explained that Shinso was being considered for a transfer to their department, should any of the students disappoint him during the upcoming sports festival. Shinso nodded in acknowledgement. Suddenly, Todoroki stood up, requesting permission to assist Shinso in caring for Midoriya. He expressed his longing to learn more about young children, as he needed that experience to become a hero. Izuku, recognizing Todoroki's intentions, reluctantly agreed, provided they kept the noise level down. Satisfied, Todoroki returned to his seat. Izuku thought to himself that having more than one caretaker would be beneficial. After all, Izuku had never shared the significant details of his childhood with him, and it was wise to be prepared. With that, Izuku dismissed the class, and everyone shuffled out, anticipating a long day ahead. The first class was taught by Present Mic, Shinso held. Little Izuku, who slept soundly in his arms. Todoroki watched with envy and playfully stepped on Shinso's foot. Shinso flinched, stirring Izuku from his slumber. Todoroki seized the opportunity, asserting that it was his turn to hold the baby now that he was awake. Shinso reluctantly handed Izuku over, making a face at Todoroki. Baby Izuku rubbed his sleepy eyes and smiled, causing several classmates, including Uraraka, Momo, and Mina, to swoon dramatically. Todoroki winced at the cuteness, while Qinsō blushed and hid his face. Ida's eyes glistened with emotion, and to everyone's surprise, even Tokoyami, usually aloof, blushed slightly and looked away, while Dark Shadow cooed at Izuku. Aizawa peeked around the corner and quickly turned away. Present Mike and Midnight, witnessing Aizawa's reaction, pulled out their phones to capture the moment. They excitedly discussed how they were gathering enough material for their project before Mike remembered he had a class to teach and rushed back. As for Aizawa's expression and the implications of the photos, it was clear he was not pleased. The bell rang, signaling the start of English class. Izuku gurgled and clapped at the sound, and Mike burst through the door with enthusiasm. The classes proceeded normally, punctuated by baby Izuku's heartwarming smiles and the playful banter between Todoroki and Qinsō. Finally, lunchtime arrived. Baby Izuku responded to Todoroki with a cheerful sound, and Todoroki, who lacked experience with children, nodded in acknowledgement. He held up a spoonful of oatmeal with a serious expression and instructed Izuku to eat. From a distance on campus, All Might sneezed, expressing his frustration with his allergies. Meanwhile, Qinsō took the spoon from Todoroki's hand, gently reprimanding him for his approach. He then offered the spoon to Izuku, attempting to feed him. However, Izuku coughed and spat the oatmeal back, landing it on Qinsō's face, which caused the baby to cry uncontrollably. Qinsō wiped his face with an annoyed gesture, revealing his displeasure while Todoroki struggled to contain his laughter. Qinsō shot him a glare, and soon they were playfully bickering, creating quite a scene. One boy had remnants of oatmeal on his face, while the other was laughing, both caught up in the chaos surrounding the crying baby. Bakugo, unable to tolerate the noise any longer, stood up and approached the two boys, slamming his fist onto their table with a loud bang. Todoroki and Qinsō glanced at him, feeling a twinge of guilt. Bakugo then took the spoon, blowing on it before making train sounds as he moved it toward Izuku's mouth. To everyone's surprise, Izuku happily accepted the spoon. Once the oatmeal was finished, Bakugo cleared his throat and returned to his own table, sitting beside Kirishima as if nothing had happened. Both Qinsō and Todoroki reflected on the capabilities of a childhood friend. Suddenly, Izuku sat up straight, gazing at the two boys with an intense look. His green eyes sparkled with intelligence, as if he were peering into their very souls, prompting them to lean in closer. Izuku's face inched toward them as he began to babble in a language only he understood. His nonsensical words filled the air, leaving Todoroki and Qinsō frozen in place, sweat trickling down their brows. It felt as though he was revealing their innermost secrets, and from the shadows, Aizawa face-bombed, realizing this was what Izuku had been warning him about. At the end of the day, Present Mike held Izuku in Principal Nizu's office, gently placing him on Nizu's desk. Nizu, with his hands folded neatly in his lap, looked at Izuku with anticipation. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble, and dark clouds gathered in the sky. A massive lightning bolt struck down from the stormy heavens, crashing through the ceiling and hitting baby Izuku. Remarkably, the baby appeared unfazed, almost as if he was enjoying the surge of electricity. As the energy coursed through him, Izuku began to grow, his clothes straining against his expanding form until they ripped away, revealing his toned physique. Midnight, who was also present, blushed at the sight. Fortunately, some fabric remained intact, covering him just enough. Izuku opened his eyes, now reflecting the intelligence of his teenage self. He groaned, rolling his shoulders and cracking his neck, expressing his disdain for being a baby. Aizawa, Kayama, and Hisashi stared in disbelief, while Nizu, though surprised, had anticipated this outcome. Hisashi's glasses slipped from his nose in shock. Todoroki and Qinsō burst into the office, having witnessed the lightning strike. They were taken aback by the sight of Izuku, now mostly uncovered, and both turned bright red, awkwardly retreating down the hall with stiff movements, reminiscent of robots. Ida would have been proud of their reaction. Back to the original storyline. Previously on Primal Instinct Izuku. After an intense battle, Izuku transformed into an adorable kitten and affectionately liked Todoroki's face, causing Todoroki to faint from overwhelming cuteness. This made Izuku the victor of the match. The crowd erupted in cheers, as Midoriya Izuku always brought excitement whenever he entered the ring. The outcome of the rivalry for Midoriya Izuku's affection between Shinso Hitoshi and Todoroki Shoto remained uncertain. However, one thing was clear: Izuku never seemed to get enough sleep. Izuku sat quietly beside Todoroki's bed in the nurse's office. He hadn't intended to use his ultimate move, but Todoroki was a formidable opponent who left him with no choice. Izuku sighed, recalling the moment Todoroki's consciousness faded as he collapsed in the arena. His most powerful technique, Kitten Lick, had decisively overwhelmed his rival. Sometimes, it could even have lasting effects. Izuku shuddered at the thought. His first test subject was now in a mental health facility, giggling about cute and kitty even in his dreams. Poor guy. Rising from his seat, Izuku decided to take a walk outside to grab a drink before his match with Katsuki, the final showdown for first place. Tokoyami had secured third place, as Dark Shadow's vulnerability to light allowed Katsuki to keep him at bay with small explosions. Katsuki was brimming with confidence, but Izuku understood that while he was strong, he was still a bully. And bullies never triumph in the end. After all, his father had given him permission to go all out. Recovery Girl might not approve, but it was a risk Izuku was willing to take. He would not let Katsuki off easily. As he walked, Izuku suddenly stopped and began to giggle, which escalated into a maniacal laugh he had learned from his private teacher, Nizu, who took pride in his evil laugh training. The eerie laughter echoed through the hallways until Izuku felt a tap on his shoulder, causing him to halt. It was Shinso. Izuku greeted him with a smirk, and Shinso looked at him with wide eyes. Realizing he had been laughing again, Izuku scratched the back of his head, feeling a bit embarrassed. He explained that Nizu-sensei had been teaching him, and it had become a habit while he contemplated his upcoming match with Katsuki. He stifled another giggle. Shinso cleared his throat and expressed his longing to discuss potential strategies for utilizing his quirk and becoming a hero. He recognized Izuku's analytical nature and sought his guidance for suggestions. Izuku's grin widened as he agreed to help. They arranged to meet the following day after school, and Shinso promised to send him the address. After exchanging numbers, Izuku left to prepare for his match, muttering to himself and unintentionally scaring away those wandering the halls. Within moments, Izuku found himself in the arena, facing Bakugo, his final opponent. Once a childhood friend, Bakugo had always been more of a bully. Izuku narrowed his eyes at him, ready for midnight's signal to begin. Bakugo crouched, explosions crackling in his hands, a wicked grin spreading across his face. He declared that Izuku was going down. Izuku retorted, asserting that Bakugo would be the one on the ground first. Midnight raised her WHP, signaling the start of the match. Both boys locked eyes, a challenge passing between them. "Begin," she shouted. The two boys charged forward, fists swinging with determination. One punch was like a massive lion's paw, while the other was fueled by explosive energy. When their fists collided, a small shockwave rippled through the stadium, showcasing their immense power. Izuku landed a punch to Bakugo's stomach, causing him to flinch and stumble back slightly. Seizing the moment, Izuku swung his lion-powered leg, striking Bakugo's side and making him stagger. Izuku hopped back, assessing his opponent. He expressed his surprise at Bakugo's resilience, noting that most would have fallen by now. With a wide grin, he declared his intention to step up his game. Suddenly, Izuku surged forward with remarkable speed, unleashing a flurry of rapid strikes on Bakugo. Despite Bakugo's attempts to retaliate, he found himself overwhelmed by the relentless barrage. The onslaught continued until Izuku landed a sharp uppercut to Bakugo's jaw. Jumping back once more, Izuku removed himself from immediate danger. He commented on Bakugo's state, noting that he hadn't even used his quirk yet. Bakugo's eyes widened as he sensed what was coming next. Izuku grinned and announced his approach. In an instant, Izuku vanished, leaving only a cloud of dust in his wake. Bakugo looked around in confusion, only to hear a whisper that sent shivers down his spine. When he turned, he was met with a powerful fist. Bakugo was propelled backward but managed to grab onto the ground, preventing himself from falling out of bounds. Looking up, he saw Izuku's new form and began to sweat nervously. Izuku had transformed into a creature that resembled a werewolf, but with feline features, a 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏. Standing upright, he displayed a muscular physique, with human-like hands and sharp claws. His face retained human characteristics, adorned with stripes and tiger ears. Izuku smirked, proudly showcasing his new appearance. He explained that he had been training hard for the sports festival, a fact his father had ensured. He then declared it was time to end the match. Charging forward, Izuku's heavy footsteps echoed as Bakugo bravely darted between his legs, trying to outmaneuver the were-tiger's size. Bakugo swung a right hook, but Izuku anticipated the move and caught his fist. He taunted Bakugo, reminding him that he knew his techniques well. With a firm grip, Izuku flung Bakugo into the air and followed up with a powerful kick, keeping him airborne. It became a game of keeping Bakugo aloft. Finally, as Bakugo soared upward once more, Izuku delivered a decisive punch, sending him crashing down to the ground. The impact created a crater, and smoke billowed from the cracked earth. Bakugo gasped for breath, his eyes closing. Midnight announced Izuku as the winner, and the arena fell silent for a moment. Then, the crowd erupted into applause, cheers, and whistles. Izuku simply walked out of the stadium, yawning, leaving behind a defeated Bakugo. Chaos surrounded him. To his right, All Might was in a precarious situation. To his left, a giant monster rampaged wildly. And there he stood, caught in the midst of it all. How did he end up in this situation? It all began when All Might arrived to present the awards. All Might announced his presence with a booming voice, jumping into the stadium and landing with a satisfying thud. Izuku quietly wondered if he was the next Santa Claus, prompting a smirk from 𝗕𝗏𝗄𝗏. All Might confidently approached the students on the podium, stopping to commend 𝗕𝗏𝗄𝗏 for his performance in the battles. He placed a medal around 𝗕𝗏𝗄𝗏's neck, who nodded in appreciation before All Might moved on. Next, All Might greeted Bakugo, who was visibly frustrated and restrained with a 𝗔𝗂𝗁𝗍 and metal braces. His eyes were wide and filled with fury, veins bulging beneath his skin. Bakugo was bound with thick chains to a sturdy post behind him, and quirk-blocking 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗏 restrained his hands. All Might hesitated, sensing the tension. He decided to remove Bakugo's 𝗔𝗂𝗁𝗍, despite Midnight's warning that it might not be wise. With a few clicks, the heavy metal was removed. Just as All Might was about to reassure everyone, he was startled to find Bakugo had latched onto his arm. In a moment of chaos, All Might flailed about, trying to shake Bakugo off while the young hero held on tightly. With a powerful explosion, Bakugo propelled both himself and All Might into the air, shattering the stadium lights and plunging the arena into darkness. In the ensuing chaos, 𝗕𝗏𝗄𝗏 lost control of his quirk, and dark shadow rampaged through the crowd, causing panic. Midnight and Present Mic were unable to use their quirks due to the presence of civilians, and Aizawa couldn't erase 𝗕𝗏𝗄𝗏's quirk without risking harm. As All Might struggled against Bakugo's grip, dark shadow wreaked havoc, and 𝗕𝗏𝗄𝗏 desperately tried to regain control. Amidst the turmoil, Izuku stood frozen, wondering what he had done to deserve such a scene. Later, in the classroom, Aizawa cleared his throat, addressing Class 1. 𝗕𝗏𝗄𝗏, Bakugo, and Izuku were covered in scratches and bruises, looking worse for wear. Aizawa suggested they never speak of the incident again, and the class nodded in agreement, with 3 individuals showing more enthusiasm than the rest. Aizawa then shifted to a more serious tone, discussing the internship requests the students had received from pro heroes based on their performances in the sports festival. He handed out papers and wrote the names of the 3 most requested students on the board: Midoriya Izuku, Todoroki Shoto, and 𝗕𝗏𝗄𝗏 Fumikichi. Bakugo, sitting in the back of the classroom wearing a dunce cap, simmered with frustration. Aizawa addressed him directly, explaining that he hadn't made the top 3 due to the earlier incident. The class chuckled, and Bakugo fumed silently. As the bell rang, Aizawa announced that class was dismissed and reminded everyone to choose an agency for their internships. The students began to leave, chatting and sharing papers. Aizawa caught Izuku at the doorway and pulled him aside, informing him that he and Nizu wanted to discuss internships later that day. Izuku nodded in acknowledgement before heading to his next class. Izuku suddenly recalled that he had English class next, and a wave of anxiety washed over him. As he walked through the hallway toward the large, imposing door at the end, it felt as though everyone was watching him, whispering about the trouble he was about to face. After all, being summoned to the principal's office was never a good sign, even in a society of superheroes. He had grown accustomed to the feeling. After knocking, Izuku opened the tall door and stepped inside, closing it behind him. 𝗫𝗠, as always, was seated at his desk and turned to meet Izuku's gaze. "Hello there, Midoriya. Please, have a seat," 𝗫𝗠 said, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. Izuku complied, taking a seat. "Would you like some tea?" 𝗫𝗠 inquired, pouring a cup for Izuku without waiting for a response. When the principal offers tea, one does not refuse. Izuku accepted the warm cup, taking a small sip before setting it down in front of him. He asked what 𝗫𝗠 wanted to discuss. 𝗫𝗠 smiled, revealing his intention. He wanted to invite Izuku to join him for an internship. He explained that Aizawa also wished to extend an invitation, and they had decided to split the internship time between them. Izuku raised an eyebrow, intrigued. 𝗫𝗠 clarified that he would mentor Izuku for the first half, while Aizawa would take over for the latter half. Izuku expressed his gratitude for the opportunity and accepted the offer. 𝗫𝗠 beamed, pleased to have his star pupil on board. Just then, there was a knock at the door. 𝗫𝗠 called for the person to enter, and Aizawa stepped inside, quickly closing the door behind him. He inquired if Izuku had agreed to the internship. 𝗫𝗠 assured him that Izuku had accepted. Aizawa scratched the back of his neck, feeling a bit awkward, and decided to leave, mumbling an excuse as he exited. 𝗫𝗠 chuckled, noting how Aizawa could be shy when it came to personal matters, despite his pride in showing off Izuku at the sports festival. Izuku smiled lightly, admitting that he didn't mind Aizawa's quirks. 𝗫𝗠 laughed, pointing out how similar Izuku had become to Aizawa in that regard. Izuku looked down, feeling a bit embarrassed, and excused himself from the office. 𝗫𝗠 sighed, calling out to the two hidden figures in the room. He knew they were there. With a click, Present Mike and Midnight tumbled out of the air vent, tangled in their photography equipment. They quickly straightened up and bowed, clearly embarrassed. Mike stammered an explanation, but 𝗫𝗠 interrupted, expressing his support for their project to capture Aizawa on camera. He encouraged them to keep him informed whenever they needed assistance, confident they had enough material to start their project. Midnight thanked 𝗫𝗠 for his unexpected support, and they excused themselves, feeling pleased about their collaboration. 𝗫𝗠 then turned his attention back to Izuku, who had paused at the door. He informed Izuku that the other students were leaving for their internships and that he would be staying at UA since he was under 𝗫𝗠's care. Izuku was surprised but followed 𝗫𝗠, realizing he hadn't considered the implications of living arrangements. 𝗫𝗠 was quite wealthy, after all, running the top hero school in Japan. After several elevator rides, they reached the top floor of UA, where 𝗫𝗠's private living suite was located. 𝗫𝗠 opened the large doors to reveal a lavish living space that was beyond anything Izuku had imagined. 𝗫𝗠 led him to one of the many doors and opened it to reveal a stunning bedroom. Izuku's jaw nearly dropped in awe. If this guest room was so luxurious, he could only imagine what 𝗫𝗠's own bedroom looked like. 𝗫𝗠 explained that they would discuss the internship plans today. Izuku would attend some UA classes, but 𝗫𝗠 also intended to involve him in his hero work, promising that it would be more than just the usual lessons. Izuku nodded, still trying to process the overwhelming situation. 𝗫𝗠 informed him that he had about an hour to settle in before dinner would be served, expressing hope that Izuku would enjoy the rich food. Before Izuku could respond, 𝗫𝗠 hurried away to prepare the meal, leaving Izuku alone in the magnificent room. At that moment, Izuku's mind was racing, and he could only think of one thing. What had he gotten himself into? Midoriya looked at the all-might costume in his hands and sighed. Halloween had arrived, a day when people donned costumes and visited others for treats. He had cherished Halloween for as long as he could remember, recalling countless nights spent trick-or-treating in his bright all-might outfit. However, he sighed again as he folded the costume. He had mistakenly bought a toddler size. It wasn't entirely his fault. His mother used to accompany him for costume shopping, but now that he lived in the UA dorms, she was too far away. This mix-up had left him in a predicament. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts, and a cool, soft voice called from the other side, asking if he was ready. "Sure, Todoroki," he replied, quickly hiding the All Might costume in his drawer before turning to greet his friend. He gasped at the sight of Todoroki, who wore a loose, frilled white button-up shirt tied with a thin black lace necktie. Over it, he had on a dark red and black vest fastened with gold clasps, and a long black coat with gold trim draped over his shoulders. White gloves adorned his hands, and he even sported a couple of gold rings on his fingers. "Todoroki," Midoriya stuttered, causing Todoroki to tilt his head in confusion. Stuttering was unusual for him. "What are you wearing?" he managed to ask. "Oh," Todoroki said, examining his outfit. "Ishido put it together for me." Midoriya understood immediately. It was typical of Mina to come up with such creative ideas. "Do I not look presentable?" Todoroki frowned, and Midoriya quickly shook his hands. No, not at all. You look fantastic. Striking." I'm going to stop now," he blurted out, looking down at his feet, feeling a blush creep onto his cheeks. What was wrong with him? "Thank you, Midoriya. But what happened with your costume?" "We're leaving soon, and you're not dressed up," Todoroki pointed out, and Midoriya frowned. "The costume I ordered was not the right size. So I probably won't be able to go with you guys," he explained. Todoroki appeared deep in thought. "I'm sure we can pull something together for you." Midoriya shook his head. "You guys don't have enough time. You should leave without me and enjoy yourselves." "I won't leave without you, Midoriya. I'll let the others go ahead, and I'll stay behind to help you with your costume." "But then you can't trick-or-treat with the others." "I can trick-or-treat with you." Midoriya felt a blush rise again and turned away, muttering his reluctant agreement. Todoroki smiled slightly, pleased with the outcome. "Now, let's get started." A little while later, Todoroki called out to Midoriya, asking if he was finished. He heard a mumbled response before the door opened to reveal Midoriya draped in a white bedsheet, covering half of his face. "Boo," Midoriya said monotonously, and Todoroki couldn't help but applaud. "All right then, let's go," Midoriya said, brushing past him and heading for the door. Todoroki stood still for a moment before Midoriya called back, asking if he was coming. He quickly patted his cheeks, trying to dispel the blush that had crept onto his face. How could Midoriya look so adorable with just a simple white sheet? "Coming," he replied, jogging over to where Midoriya waited, willing his blush to fade. A few minutes later, Midoriya chuckled beside him, commenting on how funny Todoroki could be. He smiled back, feeling warmth radiate from Midoriya's bright demeanor. "This house next," Midoriya pointed to a dark gray house on their left, and they walked up the sidewalk. Midoriya grinned at him, and he nodded in agreement. As he rang the doorbell, Midoriya ducked behind a tree. A man answered, and Todoroki held up his basket as if performing a ritual. "Trick or treat," he stated firmly, and the man gulped, asking if they wanted candy. Todoroki frowned, and the man quickly dumped a generous amount of candy into his already full bowl. He bowed in thanks, but before the man could turn away, Midoriya suddenly leaped from behind the tree, shouting enthusiastically, "Treat! Treat!" The man was startled, and they ended up with all the candy. Midoriya raised his hand for a high five, and the other person obliged. Midoriya expressed that he had enjoyed himself but could not carry any more candy. They both laughed as one recalled a peculiar old person who had hoarded candy and refused to share. Midoriya tried to remember the name, musing over it. The other person chimed in, suggesting it was LazyAnimaniac, which prompted another chuckle from Midoriya. They decided to head back to the dorms, but suddenly, Midoriya stumbled over his sheet, nearly falling. In an attempt to catch him, the other person ended up falling as well, leading to an unexpected moment on the ground. Midoriya's face was slightly flushed, and his bright green eyes sparkled with surprise. The other person found themselves hovering over him, captivated by the moment and absent-mindedly tracing the scar along Midoriya's jawline, leaning in closer. Just then, a tired voice interrupted the scene, causing 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗃 to sit up quickly and bump heads with the other person. It was 𝗫𝗁, who greeted 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗃 with a grin. He complimented 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗃's ghost costume, which elicited a light push from 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗃 in playful annoyance. As 𝗫𝗁 turned to acknowledge the other person, he asked who they were. 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗃 introduced them as his good friend, 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗃, which stung a little. 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗃 cleared his throat and introduced himself, and 𝗫𝗁 responded with a friendly grin. 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗃 insisted they should head back to the dorms, pulling 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗃 closer. 𝗫𝗁, however, mentioned he was also heading that way and offered to walk with them, citing the darkness and the need for company. 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗃 felt a surge of protectiveness and insisted he could look after 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗃 just fine, not wanting to impose on 𝗫𝗁. 𝗫𝗁 countered that it was no trouble for him, as he was already going that direction. The two exchanged playful banter, each trying to assert their point, leading to a light-hearted argument that made little sense. Suddenly, they both realized 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗃 was missing. 𝗫𝗁's phone rang, revealing a picture of 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗃 at the UA dorms. 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗃 waved cheerfully, explaining that he had decided to move ahead and solve their little dispute. He suggested they could protect each other on the way back. Before 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗃 could voice his disagreement, 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗃 added that the answer to their earlier confusion was simply what. This led to further bewilderment as they tried to decipher the meaning behind 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗃's words, with 𝗫𝗁 enthusiastically agreeing with him. After a brief exchange of confusion, 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗃 waved goodbye, and the screen went dark, leaving both 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗃 and 𝗫𝗁 staring at each other in disbelief. Later, Izuku and 𝗫𝗁 sat at a long table, enjoying a quiet dinner. Afterward, Izuku prepared for bed and woke up the next morning, ready for the day ahead. Everything seemed normal until he arrived at 𝗫𝗁's office. To his surprise, 𝗫𝗁 popped out from a desk drawer, cheerfully exclaiming the importance of punctuality. Izuku, bewildered, asked what 𝗫𝗁 was doing in the drawer. 𝗫𝗁 explained he had been sleeping, as everyone needed rest. Izuku found it too early to deal with 𝗫𝗁's peculiarities. 𝗫𝗁 cleared his throat and outlined the day's plan. They would be assessing classrooms and situations, emphasizing the importance of experience in hero work. Izuku nodded, acknowledging the need for practical experience, especially since he had faced rigorous training from Aizawa during his internship. 𝗫𝗁, full of energy, suggested they patrol until the students arrived, hopping off the desk and leading the way. Izuku followed, muttering about the challenges that lay ahead. Izuku's head snapped up, alerted by a sudden scream. 𝗫𝗁, his principal, quickly urged him to investigate. They hurried towards the alley where the noise had originated. There, they encountered a villain with pale blue hair, hunched over a civilian with an outstretched hand, demanding a Nintendo SW. Recognizing the villain as Shigaraki from a previous incident, Izuku felt a mix of fear and determination. Shigaraki, seemingly fixated on the woman holding the console, shouted for the SW. In a panic, she threw it at him and fled. 𝗫𝗁 called for Izuku to act, and he lunged forward, attempting to restrain Shigaraki. Just then, a misty figure emerged from a purple portal, 𝗬𝗁𝗁𝗍𝗁. He created a portal beneath Shigaraki, who vanished into it. 𝗫𝗁 tried to pursue, but 𝗬𝗁𝗍𝗁 quickly disappeared into the mist. 𝗫𝗁 sighed in frustration, acknowledging the experience as valuable, while Izuku stood in shock, lamenting the lost opportunity for the Nintendo SW. 𝗫𝗁 facepalmed, realizing the boy's priorities. A few hours later, Class 1B students filled the classroom. Izuku recognized some of them, including Kendo and 𝗫𝗁, who had recently transferred. Monoma, his fellow conspirator, was also present. 𝗫𝗁 entered, and the class quickly quieted down, curious about his presence. 𝗫𝗁 introduced himself and explained that they would engage in an intense training session before their internships. 𝗫𝗁 raised a question about the nature of the training, prompting 𝗫𝗁 to reveal that they would be facing the winner of the sports festival, who was also Eraserhead's pupil. The students leaned in, eager to learn who it was, and 𝗫𝗁 grinned wider, announcing that it was 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗃 Izuku, who was currently asleep on the floor. 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗃 dusted himself off and, with 𝗫𝗁's permission, left to study deception techniques. Class 1B, having witnessed his abilities, no longer doubted him and held a healthy fear of his potential. For some unknown reason, Midoriya found himself in the middle of the ocean. Aizawa scrolled through comments with a smirk, amused by the speculation surrounding Izuku's whereabouts. He strolled along the boardwalk, looking out at the calm sea, knowing how far out Izuku was. Many assumed Nizu or Kurogyari were responsible for his situation, while others thought he had simply fallen asleep at sea. Aizawa tucked his phone away and took a deep breath, savoring the salty air. It was a peculiar day to wake up after being stranded in the ocean. He chuckled to himself as he returned to dry land, where he spotted Nizu approaching. Nizu greeted Aizawa, who nodded in response. The principal inquired about the reasoning behind placing Midoriya on a raft in the ocean without food or water. Aizawa casually mentioned that he had provided an instant ramen packet. Nizu's brow twitched, questioning how Izuku would prepare it without any means to cook. Aizawa shrugged, confident that Izuku would manage. Nizu sighed, concerned for the boy's safety. Aizawa argued that if Izuku survived, he would return stronger, insisting that this was part of the internship's purpose. Nizu, though skeptical, acknowledged that there was little they could do now. He warned Aizawa that if anything happened to Izuku, he would face serious consequences. Aizawa grimaced, defending his past actions as accidents. Nizu reminded him that official reports often told a different story. Aizawa insisted he wouldn't argue further, promising that Izuku would return alive. Nizu replied with a hint of doubt, but Aizawa remained confident in his student's abilities. Izuku slowly opened his eyes and blinked a few times before sitting up. He yawned and looked around, admiring the gentle waves of the sea against his raft, which bobbed lightly in a rhythmic manner. Since meeting Aizawa, he had grown fond of the ocean, spending a lot of time at Dagoba Beach. But being out in the water was different. Suddenly, realization struck him. The ocean. Water. Izuku let out a surprised shout. Far away, Aizawa turned, sensing a sound. He muttered to himself, questioning if he had heard something, but quickly dismissed it. On the beach, a random character's girlfriend called out excitedly to her boyfriend, drawing his attention to the sea. Aizawa, noticing the commotion, shot up in surprise. That's when he saw Izuku approaching the shore on his raft, propelled by a large group of catfish that were making cheerful noises. The catfish seemed delighted about something, and Nizu, standing beside Aizawa, took off his shades in astonishment. Izuku reached the sand and pulled his raft ashore. He waded back into the water, holding a packet of ramen high in the air, eliciting cheers from the catfish. Aizawa smiled, acknowledging the unexpected turn of events. Izuku opened the packet and tossed the contents into the sea, where the catfish eagerly devoured the ramen, bowing in gratitude. He waved goodbye as they swam away, then jogged over to Aizawa and Nizu. He greeted them, apologizing for being late and asking if he had performed well in Aizawa's test. Aizawa smirked, confirming it was indeed his doing. Nizu, curious, asked how Izuku had managed to return. Izuku grinned, explaining that catfish were a mix of cats and fish, which allowed him to communicate with them. He added that this connection gave him more control over his powers. When Nizu inquired about the ramen, Izuku laughed, revealing that he had used it as a bribe, as the catfish believed ramen was the ultimate offering. Aizawa looked at him in confusion, questioning why he hadn't eaten it himself. Izuku argued that raw ramen wasn't edible, while Aizawa admitted he often did so. Izuku shook his head, feeling hungry after the ordeal, and suggested they go to Ichiraki Ramen to satisfy his appetite. Nizu agreed to treat them, and the three happily set off for ramen. Later, at the ramen shop, Nizu exclaimed how delicious the ramen was, while Aizawa nodded in agreement, enthusiastically eating his noodles. Aizawa asked Izuku how he had found the place, and Izuku explained that he used to visit often after school, though it had been a while due to his busy schedule. Nizu requested another bowl, and Izuku noted that the workers seemed new, as the familiar staff were absent. Nizu suggested they were probably out, and Izuku marveled at how much Nizu could eat, likening him to a bottomless pit. Nizu chuckled, claiming he could eat when hungry, but expressed concern for Aizawa, who was devouring his food rapidly. Izuku was shocked to learn that Aizawa was already on his sixth bowl, while Aizawa simply complained that it was ramen. Izuku laughed quietly to himself, and 𝗍𝗂 smiled at the scene, enjoying the camaraderie and the delicious food. Izuku expressed his gratitude for having such remarkable teachers. He reflected on his past, recalling how he had once been quirkless. When All Might had turned him down, just like many others before him, he had contemplated giving up. In another universe, he might never have discovered his quirk or become a hero. He smiled at the two pro-heroes, acknowledging how he had chosen to ignore All Might's dismissal and push through the prejudices and obstacles in his way. He felt fortunate not only for gaining a quirk and the opportunity to become a hero but also for meeting the two who had helped him grow and thrive, even if their methods were challenging. Aizawa grinned sheepishly, admitting that he pushed Izuku hard because he believed in his potential. He knew that Izuku could handle it and improve. 𝗍𝗂, pretending to be astonished, teased Aizawa for his unexpected sentimentality. Aizawa, looking away, gave Izuku a brief pat on the head. The worker at the ramen shop placed fresh bowls of ramen in front of them, mumbling a wish for them to enjoy their meal. Aizawa then declared it was time to eat, dismissing the earlier sentimentality. After finishing their meal, Aizawa groaned about being stuffed, and 𝗍𝗂 and Izuku nodded in agreement. Aizawa paid for the food, and the three of them slowly made their way out of the shop, inhaling the fresh night air. 𝗍𝗂 remarked on the late hour, suggesting he should head back to UA. Aizawa confirmed that he would take Izuku home for the night since he was still in his internship. 𝗍𝗂 waved goodbye and headed in the opposite direction. As they walked, Izuku playfully exhaled visible breath in the cold air, pretending to be a dragon. Aizawa chuckled at his antics, but suddenly he sensed something amiss. His eyes widened in shock as he collapsed to his knees. Izuku gasped, falling to the ground beside him. Aizawa, using the last of his strength, shook Izuku, but soon he too crumpled to the pavement, their surroundings eerily quiet at nearly midnight. A chuckle echoed from the ramen shop, and Aizawa strained to see a figure emerging. It was the worker, who removed his hat and shades, revealing striking forest green eyes and curly black hair, reminiscent of Izuku's own features. Aizawa mumbled a question, but the man hushed him, turning his attention to Izuku. He pulled out a shiny metallic object, and Aizawa's instincts screamed danger. It was a knife. The man claimed he was there to help Izuku, stating that the boy had been led astray but had stubbornly clung to his dreams. He raised the weapon, and Aizawa fought to keep his eyes open, pleading silently for the man to stop. The man laughed cruelly, declaring that this was the only way to set Izuku free. As he plunged the knife downwards, Aizawa could only watch helplessly, his body refusing to respond. He felt a deep sense of despair as the man's intentions became clear. The man's expression shifted, a mix of sadness and satisfaction, as he declared Izuku free. He withdrew the knife, and a dark pool formed beneath Izuku, staining the ground. Aizawa's vision blurred, and he felt darkness creeping in, pulling him away from the scene. As the man wiped the BLD from the blade, Aizawa's consciousness began to fade. The last thing he heard was the man's quiet farewell before he succumbed to the darkness. In a world filled with chaos and uncertainty, a figure stood at the edge of a cliff, gazing out at the horizon. The sun dipped low, casting a warm glow over the landscape, but the turmoil within was palpable. This character, known for their resilience, felt the weight of their past pressing down like a heavy cloak. They had faced countless challenges, each one shaping them into the person they had become. With every battle fought, they had learned the importance of friendship and loyalty. The memories of their companions filled their mind, reminding them of the bonds that had been forged in the heat of conflict. As they turned away from the view, a sense of determination washed over them. They would not let despair take hold. Instead, they would rise to meet whatever challenges lay ahead. The journey was far from over, and they were ready to embrace it with open arms. In the distance, a figure approached, their presence a comforting reminder of the support that surrounded them. Together, they would face the unknown, united in purpose and spirit. The promise of adventure lingered in the air, and with it, the hope for a brighter future. The story was far from finished, and the next chapter awaited. The characters would continue to grow, facing trials that would test their strength and resolve. With each step forward, they would discover new facets of themselves and the world around them. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the land, the characters prepared for what was to come. They were ready to fight for their dreams, to protect those they loved, and to carve their path through the darkness. The journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but they would face them together, stronger than ever. And so, the adventure continued, with the promise of new beginnings and the thrill of the unknown. The characters would not back down. They would rise, ready to embrace whatever fate had in store for them. The story would unfold, revealing the depths of their courage and the strength of their bonds. To be continued.